The snow had fallen for 3 days without pause, blanketing the mountain peaks of the northern territories in pristine white. Silence reigned over the ancient forest as the final flakes settled, a deceptive peace before judgment would be rendered. For centuries, the judgment circle had stood as a testament to wolf law, immutable, merciless, and absolute. Diana Winters knelt in the center of the clearing, her thin ceremonial dress offering no protection against the brutal mountain wind. Snowflakes melted against her pale skin as she kept her eyes fixed downward. To look up meant facing them, the 12 elite wolves of the Silver Moon Pack, their massive forms creating a tightening circle of death around her. This was the Provalupi, the Trial of Wolves, an ancient tradition dating back 500 years to the Great Wolf Wars, when pack law was written in blood and enforced with fang and claw. When an Omega was rejected by their destined mate during the sacred bonding ceremony, the pack wolves would decide their fate, not with words or council votes, but with primal instinct. If they attacked, death was swift. If they retreated, exile followed. Marked as rejected, left to survive alone in the wilderness. Diana had always known she was different, smaller than the other Omegas, quieter, with a wolf that never fully emerged. Most Omegas manifested their first shift by 16. At 24, Diana remained unchanged, her inner wolf silent. A defect, the elders called her, an aberration. When Lord Garrick, the beta she had been matched with since childhood, stood before the entire Silver Moon Pack during the winter solstice ceremony and spoke the words of rejection, Diana felt no surprise, only the cold weight of inevitability settling in her chest. I, Lord Garrick of the Silver Moon Pack, reject you, Diana Winters, as my mate. His voice had carried across the great hall, silencing all conversation. You are not worthy of carrying my bloodline. You are not worthy of this pack. The memory echoed in her when as she knelt in the snow, 12 pairs of golden eyes watching her with predatory intent. She could hear their breathing, smell their hunger for violence. Some had always despised her. The wolfless Omega, the burden. Now they had permission to act on that hatred. Her grandmother had told her stories of the Provalupi when she was young, how in the ancient days it was meant as mercy, a quick death for those too weak to survive rejection. But over centuries, it had become sport, entertainment. The pack gathered to watch from the tree line, placing bets on how long the rejected Omega would last, whether she would beg or remain silent, whether the wolves would make it quick or draw out her suffering. Diana had chosen silence. She would not give them the satisfaction of her screams. The snow beneath her knees had melted, soaking through the thin white fabric. Her fingers had lost feeling long ago, but she did not tremble. There was a strange peace in facing the inevitable. Perhaps death was kinder than living as a rejected Omega, scorned and broken. Around her neck hung the only possession she truly valued, a necklace of white wolf bone, intricately carved with symbols no one in the pack could decipher. Her grandmother's final gift before she passed 2 winters ago. The only person who had ever truly loved Diana, who had whispered to her on dark nights that she was more than she appeared, that her time would come. Grim, a massive scarred wolf with silver-streaked black fur, took a step forward. As the pack's executioner, he had performed this duty many times. His lips pulled back from yellowed fangs, a low growl rumbling from his chest. The others moved in perfect synchronization, tightening the circle. They had made their decision. Diana closed her eyes and thought of her grandmother. Perhaps they would meet again in whatever came after. The growling intensified, vibrating through the clearing like distant thunder. She could feel their presence, so close now that their breath created small clouds of condensation in the frozen air. She braced for the pain, for teeth sinking into flesh. But it did not come. Instead, the growling stopped, not gradually but instantly, as though every wolf had been struck dumb simultaneously. The sudden silence was so absolute that Diana could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. She opened her eyes slowly, confusion overriding fear. The wolves had frozen in place, not retreated, but stopped mid-motion as if an invisible force had turned them to stone. Their ears lay flat against their skulls, tails tucked low between their legs, bodies trembling not with aggression, but with submission, with fear. Then she felt it, a presence so powerful that the air itself seemed to grow heavy. The temperature dropped another 10 degrees, and the snow began to fall again. Harder, faster, as if the sky itself responded to something unnatural entering the clearing. A pressure built against Diana's chest, making it difficult to breathe. She turned her head slowly, following the wolf's line of sight toward the northern edge of the clearing. He stood there, barely visible through the curtain of falling snow. Tall, impossibly tall, with broad shoulders and a stance that commanded absolute authority. He wore no coat despite the freezing temperature, only dark clothing that seemed to absorb what little light remained in the winter twilight. A silver circlet rested on his head, simple yet unmistakably royal, nestled among hair as black as midnight with streaks of silver at the temples. But it was his eyes that made Diana's breath catch in her throat. They were not the golden amber of a normal wolf, nor the blue or green of human eyes. They were silver, pure, brilliant silver that pierced through the snowfall like twin moons, seeing everything, missing nothing. The Alpha King, Varys Reaver Blackthorn, ruler of the 7 territories, the Old Moon King. Diana had never seen him before, had only heard whispers and legends. The most powerful werewolf in 1,000 years, who could kill with a thought and whose mere presence made alphas bow. He never visited small packs like Silver Moon. There was no reason for him to be here. Yet here he stood, watching her with those ancient silver eyes. The wolves in the circle began to back away, whimpering, their bravado completely gone. Even Grim, the most vicious of them all, lowered his head and retreated, his tail tucked so tightly between his legs it was invisible. Within seconds, the circle had broken, the wolves scattering into the forest, leaving Diana alone on her knees in the snow. The king moved. He did not walk as humans did. He glided, silent as death, graceful as a predator. He crossed the clearing until he stood directly before her, towering over her kneeling form. Up close, he was even more terrifying. His face was all sharp angles and cold beauty, carved from ice in ancient power. A scar ran from his right temple to the edge of his gross, silver white against tan skin. His expression revealed nothing, but those silver eyes studied her with an intensity that seemed to strip away every defense, every secret. Diana tried to lower her gaze to show submission as she had been taught, but found she could not look away. Something in those eyes held her captive, demanded her attention, refused to let her hide. "Stand," he said. His voice was quiet, barely more than a whisper, but it carried absolute authority. Diana's body obeyed before her mind could process the command. She stood on shaking legs, her bare feet numb from the cold, her dress soaked through and clinging to her skin. He studied her in silence, when his gaze traveling over her face, her body, lingering on places that made her cheeks burn despite the cold. She felt exposed, vulnerable, as if he could see every thought she had ever had, every weakness she had ever hidden. "What is your name?" he asked. "Diana," she whispered, her voice cracking from disuse and cold. "Diana Winters of—" She paused, then added, "of no pack." Something flickered in his eyes, recognition perhaps, or interest. His gaze dropped to the bone necklace at her throat, and his expression changed, a subtle shift that might have been shock. In a movement too quick for human eyes to follow, his hand shot out, fingers wrapping around the white bone pendant. Diana flinched but did not step back as he lifted it, studying the ancient markings carved into its surface. "Where did you get this?" His voice remained quiet, but now held an edge like a blade against ice. "My grandmother gave it to me before she died," Diana answered, surprised by her own steadiness. "It was hers." "And her name?" "Lyra Winters. She came to the Silver Moon Pack 40 years ago from the deep forest," he finished for her, "beyond the Silver Mountains." Diana nodded, eyes widening. "How did you know?" He released the pendant, letting it fall back against her skin. Something had changed in his demeanor, a tension that hadn't been there before. He circled her slowly, a predator assessing prey, yet his expression held something else. Calculation, perhaps even wonder. "You were rejected today," he stated rather than asked. "Yes, by Lord Garrick. I am—" She swallowed hard. "Defective. My wolf never emerged." Silence. The command cracked through the air like a whip. Diana's mouth snapped shut, her heart racing. She had said something wrong. She was going to die anyway, just by a king's hand instead of wolves' teeth. But he did not strike her. Instead, he took another step closer, So close, she could feel heat radiating from his body, could smell his scent. Winter pine, mountain stone, and something ancient and powerful that made her dormant wolf stir for the first time in her life. "You are not defective," he said, his voice dropping lower. "You are moon-sealed. There is a difference, Wayhat." Diana blinked, confusion evident on her face. "I don't understand." "No, you wouldn't." He reached out again, this time slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished. When she remained still, his hand came to rest against the side of her neck, his fingers cool against her freezing skin. A warmth spread from his touch, flowing through her veins like liquid fire, chasing away the cold. It reached her core, where something long dormant stirred in response. Her breath caught as a feeling of recognition bloomed within her, her wolf acknowledging his. "The necklace you wear is called the Moon Fang," he said, his eyes never leaving hers. "It belonged to Queen Luna Blackthorn, my wife. It vanished with her 200 years ago, the night of the great eclipse." Diana's mind struggled to process his words. 200 years ago, his wife? The pendant had been in her family for generations, her grandmother had said. "That's impossible," she whispered, then immediately regretted challenging him. But Reaver merely smiled, a cold, humorless expression that didn't reach his eyes. "I have lived 973 years, Diana Winters. Very little is impossible to me." Before she could respond, a movement at the tree line caught her attention. The wolves had returned, but they were not alone. Behind them stood members of the Silver Moon Pack in human form, elders, warriors, and at their center, Lord Garrick himself, his face pale with shock and fear. Reaver turned slowly to face them, and Diana felt the air around him change, growing heavy with power. When he spoke, his voice carried across the clearing without effort. "Diana Winters stands under my protection. By ancient law and blood right, I claim her as moon-sealed. Any who challenge this will answer to me personally." Murmurs erupted among the gathered pack members, hushed and fearful. Lord Garrick stepped forward, then immediately fell to one knee, head bowed. "Alpha King Blackthorn," he said, voice trembling slightly. "We meant no disrespect. Had we known she was under your protection, you would have treated her with respect regardless." Reaver cut him off. "The trial of wolves is barbaric, a relic of darker times. It ends today, in all territories under my rule." Another older man stepped forward, Elder Thorn, the pack's historian and keeper of laws. Unlike Garrick, he did not kneel, though he did incline his head respectfully. "With all due respect, Your Majesty, the Provalupi is sacred tradition dating back to the founding of the 7 territories. The Alpha King himself cannot—" "Cannot?" Reaver's voice was soft, dangerous. The air around him shimmered with barely contained power. "Choose your next words with exceptional care, Elder." The old man paled but stood his ground. "The Moon Council must approve changes to sacred law. Even you are bound by the ancient compact." Diana watched as something dark and ancient flashed across Reaver's face. For a moment, she thought he might strike the elder down where he stood. Instead, a cold smile curved his lips. "Summon the Moon Council, then. I'm sure they will be most interested to see this." He gestured to the necklace at Diana's throat, "and to learn what it means." Elder Thorn's eyes widened as he finally noticed the pendant. Recognition, then disbelief, crossed his weathered features. "The Moonfang," he whispered. "But how? It was lost when Queen Luna—" "Exactly," Reaver cut him off. "Now you begin to understand." He turned back to Diana, his expression unreadable. "Gather your belongings. You will be coming with me to Moonhold." Diana felt the world tilt beneath her feet. Leave with the Alpha King? Leave the only home she had ever known, brutal and unwelcoming as it was? "I have nothing to gather," she found herself saying. "Nothing that matters." Something like approval flickered in his silver eyes. "Then we leave immediately." A tall, broad-shouldered man emerged from the tree line, leading 2 magnificent black horses. Unlike the cowering pack members, he approached Reaver directly, moving with the confidence of someone who knew his place in the hierarchy and was secure in it. "General Alaric," Reaver acknowledged him with a slight nod. "The perimeter is secure, Your Majesty," Alaric reported, his voice deep and gruff, "though I question the wisdom of traveling without the royal guard." Diana studied the newcomer with interest. He was clearly a high-ranking warrior, with sharp features and calculating green eyes that assessed everything as a potential threat. When those eyes landed on her, they narrowed with suspicion. "This is her?" he asked Reaver, making no attempt to hide his skepticism. "The one from the prophecy?" "Mind your tone, old friend," Reaver replied, though there was no real heat in his words. "And yes, she bears the Moonfang, and she carries Luna's blood." Alaric's eyebrows rose slightly, the only indication of his surprise. "As you say, my king." He turned to Diana, giving her a stiff, formal bow that nonetheless felt mocking. "My lady." Diana did not know how to respond. Never in her life had anyone addressed her as lady, let alone bowed to her. She settled for a slight nod, which seemed to amuse Alaric, one corner of his mouth quirking upward. Reaver removed his heavy cloak and draped it around Diana's shoulders. The fabric was surprisingly warm and carried his scent, that strange, compelling mixture of pine, stone, and ancient power. It enveloped her, making her feel simultaneously protected and claimed. "Mount up," he instructed, guiding her toward the smaller of the two horses. "It's a 3-day ride to Moonhold, and I would prefer to be away from Silver Moon territory by nightfall." As Alaric helped her onto the horse, Diana glanced back at the gathered pack members. They watched in silent disbelief as their rejected Omega was claimed by the Alpha King himself. Lord Garrick's face was a study in regret and fear, while Elder Thorn looked thoughtful, almost calculating. None moved to stop them. None dared. Reaver mounted his own horse with fluid grace, then paused, looking back at the Silver Moon pack. "Remember this day," he said, his voice carrying easily across the clearing. "The old ways are changing. The Moon Council has grown complacent, believing the threats of the past are gone forever. They are wrong." He turned to Elder Thorn specifically. "Tell them what you have seen here. Tell them the Moonfang has returned. And tell them that Diana Winters, whom you would have fed to your wolves, carries the blood of royalty, the blood of Luna Blackthorn." With those words hanging in the air, he turned his horse and led the way into the forest, Alaric and Diana following close behind. As they rode beneath the ancient pines heavy with snow, Diana found her voice. "Is it true? Am I really related to your queen?" Reaver did not turn to look at her, his eyes fixed on the path ahead. "Luna Blackthorn was not merely my queen. She was my moon-bonded mate, my true mate. And yes, the blood in your veins is hers, though how many generations removed I cannot yet say. And the moon sealed? What does that mean?" This time he did glance at her, silver eyes glinting in the fading light. "It means, Diana Winters, that you are not defective. Your wolf is not absent, it is imprisoned, locked away by a curse cast long ago during the Great Eclipse." "A curse? Why would anyone curse me?" "Not you specifically. Your bloodline. Luna's bloodline." His voice grew harder. 200 years ago, when the 7 territories were still young, a great evil rose in the east. A witch queen who called herself Eclipse. She sought to destroy the werewolf nations, to unravel the ancient moon pact that gives us our power. Alaric, riding slightly behind them, spoke up. "Queen Eclipse was jealous of our connection to the moon. Humans once had similar gifts in the time before history. They lost them. She believed we stole what should have been human birthright. Luna confronted her," Reaver continued, "during the longest lunar eclipse in 500 years. Their battle shook the mountains themselves. When it was over, Eclipse was defeated, or so we thought, but Luna was gone, the Moonfang with her. All that remained was a prophecy, written in blood on the walls of Moonhold's great hall." "What prophecy?" Diana asked, finding herself drawn into the story despite her confusion. Reaver's expression darkened. "When the Moonfang returns, born by one of Luna's blood, the final battle begins. Eclipse will rise again, and the fate of all wolfkind will rest on whether the moon seal breaks her chains or remains forever bound." Diana's hand went instinctively to the necklace, the Moonfang, resting against her chest. All her life she had been ordinary, forgettable, an Omega without a wolf, destined for rejection and death. And now, in the space of an hour, everything had changed. "I don't understand," she said again, feeling overwhelmed. "Why would my grandmother have the Moonfang? Why wouldn't she tell me any of this?" "To protect you," Reaver answered simply. "As long as you remained unknown, unnoticed, you were safe. Eclipse has agents everywhere, even after 2 centuries. They hunt for any trace of Luna's bloodline. The pack trials would have drawn attention, Alaric added grudgingly. Blood spilled during the Provalupi resonates with old magic. Your death would have created ripples. Then why didn't my grandmother tell you? Diana asked Reaver. If she knew who she was, why hide from her own kind? A shadow passed over Reaver's face, something like pain briefly visible before being masked again. That is what I intend to discover. They rode in silence for a time, the forest growing darker around them as twilight deepened toward night. Diana's mind raced, trying to absorb everything she had learned. Her grandmother, who had appeared in the Silver Moon territory 40 years ago, claiming to be a lone wolf seeking shelter, had been hiding royal blood, had perhaps been hiding from Reaver himself. Your Majesty, she began hesitantly. Reaver, he corrected, if you carry Luna's blood, you need not stand on ceremony with me. Reaver, she tried again, the name feeling strange on her tongue. You said I was moon-sealed, that my wolf is imprisoned, not absent. What does that mean for me now? He was silent for so long that Diana thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than before. It means that everything you have been told about yourself is a lie. You are not weak. You are not defective. He turned to look at her fully, silver eyes gleaming in the gathering darkness. You are, potentially, the most powerful wolf of your generation, if we can break the seal. Hope, an emotion Diana had long ago learned to suppress, fluttered in her chest. And can you break the seal? I don't know, Reaver admitted, but at Moonhold we have the greatest collection of wolf lore in the world. If answers exist anywhere, they will be found there. As if on cue, they emerged from the dense forest onto a ridge overlooking a vast valley. In the distance, bathed in the light of the rising moon, stood a mountain unlike any Diana had ever seen. Tall and solitary, it rose from the valley floor like a sentinel, and built into its very side, gleaming with an inner light that seemed to pulse in rhythm with the moon above, was a fortress of breathtaking scale. Moonhold, Reaver said, a note of pride in his voice. The ancient seat of wolfkind, built 1,000 years ago when the first moon pact was sealed. Even from this distance, Diana could see that the fortress was constructed of a strange stone that captured and reflected moonlight. As she watched, the walls seemed to shimmer, as if the stone itself were alive, breathing with the pulse of the moon. It's beautiful, she whispered. It is dying, Reaver replied, his voice hard again. Look closely. Diana narrowed her eyes, focusing on the distant fortress. Now she could see what he meant. Parts of the walls remained dark, absorbing rather than reflecting the moonlight, like wounds in the living stone. The power that sustains Moonhold is fading, Reaver explained, as is my own. The moon pact weakens with each generation, worn down by Eclipse's curse. Your appearance may be our last chance to restore what was lost. Diana felt the weight of his words, of his expectations. Yesterday she had been nothing, an omega without value kneeling in the snow awaiting death. Today she apparently carried the hopes of an entire race. I don't know if I can be what you need me to be, she said honestly. Reaver's expression softened, just slightly. None of us know our capabilities until we are tested, Diana Winters. But I have lived almost a millennium, and I have learned to recognize power, even when it is hidden. His silver eyes held hers. There is power in you. I felt it the moment I entered the clearing. Alaric cleared his throat. We should continue, Your Majesty. It will be full dark soon, and the border patrols will be changing. Reaver nodded, turning his attention back to the path ahead. 2 more hours to the valley floor. We'll make camp at the Hunter's Spring. As they continued their descent toward the valley, Diana cast one last look at the distant fortress of Moonhold, its walls pulsing with captured moonlight. Somewhere within those ancient stones lay answers about who she truly was, about the grandmother who had raised and protected her, about the curse that had sealed away part of her very nature. For the first time in her life, Diana felt something unfamiliar stirring in her chest, beneath the bone necklace. The Moonfang, that had started all of this. It wasn't her wolf, not yet. It was hope. 3 days later, they crested the final ridge leading to Moonhold. The journey had been largely silent, with Reaver lost in his own thoughts and Alaric maintaining a professional distance. Diana had used the time to observe them both, learning what she could from their interactions. Reaver was a study in control power. He moved with the fluid grace of a predator, always aware of his surroundings, always alert. Yet there was a weariness in him too, visible in rare unguarded moments. The burden of centuries, perhaps, or the weight of ruling 7 fractious territories. Alaric was more straightforward, a warrior to his core, loyal to Reaver but skeptical of Diana. He watched her constantly, as if expecting her to reveal some hidden threat. Only occasionally did his gruff exterior crack, usually when speaking of past battles or campaigns where he had fought at Reaver's side. Now as Moonhold loomed before them in all its imposing glory, Diana felt a strange sensation of homecoming, though she had never set foot here before. Up close, the fortress was even more magnificent. Built directly into the mountainside, its walls were constructed of a stone that seemed to capture light, silvery in daylight, luminescent under the moon. Great towers rose from the central keep, and massive wolf statues stood guard at the main gates. Yet Reaver had been right. The fortress was wounded. Entire sections of wall remained dark, absorbing rather than reflecting light. In places, the stone appeared cracked, like parched earth thirsting for rain. A delegation awaited them at the gates, nobles and warriors in formal attire, standing rigidly at attention. At their center stood an elderly man with a long white beard, leaning on a staff topped with a silver wolf's head. "Lord Cyrus," Reaver acknowledged him as they dismounted. "I see news of our arrival preceded us." "The Moon Council convened the moment your raven arrived, Your Majesty," Cyrus replied, his voice stronger than his aged appearance suggested. His sharp eyes immediately focused on Diana, widening slightly at the sight of the moonfang at her throat. "So it is true," he murmured. "After all these years." Reaver placed a hand on Diana's shoulder, the gesture both protective and possessive. "Diana Winters, this is Lord Cyrus, first counselor of the Moon Council and my oldest advisor." He knew Queen Luna personally. Diana inclined her head respectfully, unsure of the proper protocol. "Lord Cyrus." The old man studied her with surprising intensity. "You have her eyes," he said finally, "the same shade of gray, like storm clouds before rain." Before Diana could respond, a commotion erupted from within the delegation. A tall, elegantly dressed woman pushed her way forward, her beautiful face twisted with disdain. "This is absurd, Reaver," she declared, dispensing with formal titles entirely. "You cannot possibly believe this. This nobody from a backwater pack is of Luna's blood. Look at her, an Omega in rags." Reaver's expression hardened. "Lady Alara, always a pleasure to be reminded why I keep you on the council." The woman, Lady Alara, flushed with anger. "For my honesty, presumably. Someone must speak truth to power, especially when our king becomes blinded by desperate hope." Alaric moved subtly, positioning himself between Diana and the confrontational noblewoman. "Mind your tongue, Lady Alara. You stand before your king." Alara's gaze raked over Diana with undisguised contempt. "I see a fraud, an opportunist who somehow got her hands on a trinket and spun a tale to capture our grieving king's attention." Diana felt heat rise to her cheeks. Even here, hundreds of miles from Silver Moon territory, she was still the outsider, the unwanted Omega. "The Moon Fang is hardly a trinket," Lord Cyrus interrupted, his voice sharp. "And even from here, I can sense the blooded connection. Faint, yes, but undeniable. This young woman is of Luna's line, perhaps 5 or 6 generations removed." A murmur ran through the gathered delegation. Alara's face darkened further, but before she could speak again, Reaver raised a hand. "Enough, the council will convene at moonrise. Until then, Diana Winters is my honored guest, to be treated with all respect due her position. Is that understood?" There was steel in his voice that brooked no argument. Even Alara, for all her boldness, merely pressed her lips into a thin line and nodded stiffly. "Lord Cyrus will show you to your chambers," Reaver told Diana. "Rest, eat. Tonight will be challenging." As Cyrus led Diana through the massive gates and into Moonhold proper, she felt the weight of dozens of stairs following her progress. Word had clearly spread throughout the fortress. The Alpha King had returned with a mysterious Omega bearing the long-lost Moonfang. The interior of Moonhold was as impressive as its exterior. Vast halls with high ceilings, elaborate tapestries depicting wolf history, and everywhere the strange silvery stone that seemed to breathe with lunar energy. Yet here too, Diana could see signs of decay, darkened patches on walls, places where the stone no longer glowed, tapestries faded beyond their years. "It's dying," she said softly to Cyrus, just as Reaver said. The old counselor glanced at her with renewed interest. "You see it then. Most cannot, or choose not to." "What's happening to it?" Cyrus sighed heavily. "The eclipse curse. For 2 centuries it has worked its way through wolfkind like a slow poison. The moon pact that gives us our power, that connects us to the moon itself, is unraveling. Gradually, generation by generation." They climbed a spiral staircase carved directly into the mountain stone, emerging onto a wide corridor lined with doors of dark wood inlaid with silver. "The royal wing," Cyrus explained. "None have lived here since Queen Luna vanished." He stopped before one particular door, pushing it open to reveal a spacious chamber beyond. The room was beautiful, with high windows offering a view of the mountains, a massive 4-poster bed, and furnishings of obvious quality and age. "Queen Luna's personal chambers," Cyrus said, watching Diana's reaction closely. "King Reaver instructed they be prepared for you." Diana hesitated at the threshold, suddenly overwhelmed. "I can't. I'm not." "You are of her blood," Cyrus interrupted gently, "and you bear her moonfang. If anyone has right to these chambers, it is you." Reluctantly, Diana entered the room, feeling like an intruder despite Cyrus's assurance. The chamber held a strange energy, not threatening, but watchful, as if the very walls were assessing her worthiness. "What was she like?" Diana asked, running her fingers over a silver-backed brush on the dressing table. "Queen Luna?" Cyrus's weathered face softened with memory. Fierce, brilliant, compassionate. She could silence a room with a glance or win over an enemy with a smile. He smiled sadly. Reaver was a different man when she was alive. Lighter, less burdened. "He loved her very much," Diana said. It wasn't a question. More than his own life. When she vanished, something in him broke. For decades, he searched for her, refusing to believe she was truly gone. Even now, after 2 centuries, he has never taken another mate. Diana moved to the window, gazing out at the mountains beyond. "Why would my grandmother have the moonfang? If she was of Luna's blood, why hide in a small pack like Silver Moon?" Cyrus joined her at the window, his reflection appearing beside hers in the glass. "That is the question that has consumed the king since your discovery. The moonfang was Luna's most precious possession, the physical manifestation of her connection to the moon itself. She would not have parted with it willingly." "You think my grandmother stole it?" "No," Cyrus shook his head firmly. "If your grandmother was indeed of Luna's blood, then the moonfang would have recognized her as its rightful guardian. It cannot be stolen, it would simply return to one of Luna's line." He turned to face her directly. "Which means your grandmother was entrusted with it, perhaps by Luna herself before the final confrontation with Eclipse." Diana's mind reeled with the implications. "Are you saying my grandmother might have known Queen Luna? That's impossible. The timeline doesn't—" "Wolf nobles of royal blood can live for centuries," Cyrus interrupted. "Your grandmother, how old did she appear when she died?" Diana thought back. Elderly, but not ancient, perhaps in her 70s. And yet she appeared in Silver Moon territory 40 years ago, already an adult. Did she age normally during those 40 years? Diana opened her mouth to say yes, then hesitated, thinking more carefully. "No," she realized. "She looked much the same on the day she died as in my earliest memories. I never questioned it." Cyrus nodded, as if confirming a suspicion. Royal blood, slowed aging, and the ability to conceal her true nature from an entire pack. Your grandmother was no ordinary wolf, Diana Winters. A knock at the door interrupted them. A servant entered, bearing a tray of food and a bundle of clothing. "By order of the king," the young woman explained, setting down her burdens and bowing deeply before retreating. Cyrus moved toward the door. "Eat, rest. I will return before moonrise to escort you to the council chamber." He paused, his expression grave. "Be prepared. The Moon Council is divided, and many will resist what your presence represents. The return of the Moonfang signals change, and change frightens those who benefit from the current order." After he left, Diana examined the clothing that had been provided. a gown of midnight blue, embroidered with silver thread and patterns that matched the symbols on the moonfang. Beside it lay a silver circlet set with moonstones, the garments of a royal. Diana touched them hesitantly, then looked at her own reflection in the mirror. The Omega rejected for having no wolf, for being defective and unworthy. Now dressed in the Queen's chambers, expected to wear royal garments before a council of the most powerful wolves in the 7 territories. Her hand went to the moonfang at her throat. Whatever secrets it held, whatever power it contained, she could feel it resonating with something deep inside her. The place where her wolf should be. Not empty as she had always believed, but sealed away, waiting. If Reaver was right, if she truly carried royal blood and the power that came with it, then perhaps it was time to stop kneeling in the snow, awaiting judgment from those who deemed her unworthy. Perhaps it was time to stand. Moonlight filtered through the high windows of Queen Luna's chambers as Diana stood before the mirror, the royal gown flowing around her like liquid night. The midnight blue fabric shimmered with silver embroidery that matched the ancient symbols carved into the moonfang at her throat. She barely recognized herself. Gone was the rejected Omega in rags, replaced by a woman who looked as if she belonged in these halls of power. A soft knock at the door announced Lord Cyrus's return. The elderly advisor's eyes widened slightly when he saw her transformed. "You look," he paused, searching for words, "as if you were born to wear those colors." Diana touched the silver circlet resting on her head, feeling like an imposter despite the garment's perfect fit. "I don't know how to be what they expect me to be." Cyrus smiled gently. "None of us do at first. Even Luna herself struggled with the weight of expectation when she first came to Moonhold." He offered his arm. "Come, the council awaits." The corridors of Moonhold seemed to pulse with anticipation as they made their way toward the council chamber. Servants and nobles alike stopped to stare at Diana, whispers following in her wake. Some bowed respectfully, while others made no attempt to hide their suspicion or disdain. "Pay them no mind," Cyrus advised. "For 2 centuries there have been those who sought to fill the void left by Luna's disappearance. Your presence threatens carefully cultivated ambitions." "Like Lady Alara's?" Diana asked. Cyrus nodded. "She has positioned herself as Reaver's most trusted advisor and potentials made for decades. Your arrival is inconvenient for her." They reached a set of massive doors carved with phases of the moon, from new to full and back again. 4 guards in silver armor stood at attention, their eyes flickering briefly with recognition as they took in Diana's appearance. "The council is assembled," one guard informed Cyrus. "The king awaits." The doors swung open, revealing a vast circular chamber. At its center stood a round table of polished stone that seemed to glow from within with captured moonlight. Seated around it were 12 figures, 6 men and 6 women, each wearing ceremonial robes marked with different pact symbols. At the head of the table, in a chair slightly larger than the others, sat Reaver Blackthorn, his silver eyes immediately finding Diana as she entered. The room fell silent. Cyrus led her forward, his voice ringing out in the silence. "I present Diana Winters, bearer of the Moonfang, descendant of Luna Blackthorn's blood." Diana felt the weight of 24 eyes upon her, scrutinizing, judging, doubting. Lady Alara's gaze was particularly venomous, her perfect features twisted with barely concealed hatred. Reaver stood, his commanding presence drawing all attention. "Diana Winters comes under my protection and by my invitation. She will be accorded all rights and privileges of her bloodline." An older man with a grizzled beard and hard eyes spoke first. "With respect, Your Majesty, a necklace does not make royal blood. There must be proof beyond a trinket that could have been stolen or forged." Murmurs of agreement rippled through several council members. "Lord Fenris," Reaver acknowledged the speaker, his tone deceptively mild. "The Moonfang cannot be stolen or forged. It answers only to Luna's bloodline. Would you care to attempt to wear it yourself to prove the point?" Lord Fenris paled slightly. "That won't be necessary." "I thought not." Reaver turned to Diana. "Approach the table." Heart pounding, Diana walked forward until she stood directly across from Reaver. The table between them seemed to pulse more intensely as she neared, the captured moonlight brightening. "The Stone of Truth responds to her," a female council member with silver-streaked black hair whispered, her voice filled with awe. just as it did for Queen Luna. A parlor trick, Lady Alara dismissed. The king's power could easily cause such a reaction. Could it? Reaver asked softly, taking it a step back from the table. As he distanced himself, the light continued to pulse in rhythm with Diana's heartbeat. Silence fell again, heavier this time. Cyrus cleared his throat. There is a more definitive test. The bloodstone. Several council members shifted uncomfortably. Lord Fenris shook his head. The bloodstone has not been used in centuries. It is dangerous, unpredictable. What is the bloodstone? Diana asked, unable to contain her curiosity. Reaver's eyes never left hers as he answered. A relic from the first moon pact, a stone that recognizes the blood of those who signed the original covenant. My blood. Luna's blood. Lady Alara rose to her feet, her voice sharp. This is absurd. We cannot possibly subject the king to such a ritual based on the claims of an unknown Omega from a backwater pack. I do not recall asking your permission, Lady Alara, Reaver replied, his voice soft but edged with steel. He turned to Cyrus. Bring the bloodstone. The old advisor bowed and disappeared through a side door. The council chamber erupted in hushed conversations, some anxious, others outright hostile. Diana stood awkwardly at the table's edge, feeling like an intruder. Reaver caught her eye and inclined his head slightly, a silent reassurance that did little to calm her racing heart. Cyrus returned moments later, carrying a small wooden box inlaid with silver. He placed it carefully on the table before Reaver, then stepped back, his expression grave. The bloodstone has not been awakened since Luna disappeared, Cyrus explained to Diana. It may be temperamental. Reaver opened the box, revealing a smooth, oval stone of deep crimson. It appeared ordinary except for a faint glow that seemed to emanate from somewhere deep within its core. The ritual requires blood freely given, Reaver said, drawing a small, silver dagger from his belt. Without hesitation, he drew the blade across his palm, allowing several drops of blood to fall onto the stone. The effect was immediate. The bloodstone flared with brilliant light, pulsing like a heartbeat, the crimson deepening to the color of fresh blood. Diana watched, mesmerized, as Reaver extended the dagger to her, hilt first. Your turn. Taking the dagger with trembling fingers, Diana followed his example, drawing the blade across her palm with a wince. The pain was sharp but brief. She held her bleeding hand over the stone, allowing her blood to mingle with Reaver's. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a sound like a distant bell, the stones pulsing synchronized perfectly with the light in the council table. The crimson glow expanded, forming a ghostly image above the stone, a complex pattern of interlocking lines and symbols that Diana somehow recognized, though she had never seen them before. The royal bloodline, Cyrus breathed. It hasn't shown that pattern since Luna stood in this chamber, Reaver finished, his voice strangely tight. He looked at Diana with an expression she couldn't decipher. Wonder, perhaps, or grief, or something between the two. Lord Fenris cleared his throat. The bloodstone doesn't lie. She carries Luna's blood. He bowed his head slightly toward Diana. I withdraw my objection. Others around the table murmured agreement, though Lady Alara remained rigid, her face a mask of barely contained fury. Reaver raised his voice to address the full council. Diana Winters will remain at Moonhold as my honored guest. She will be given full access to the royal archives and all resources necessary to understand her heritage. His eyes swept the room, challenging any to object. And she will begin training immediately to awaken her sealed wolf. This announcement caused another stir among the council. A tall, severe woman with ash-blonde hair spoke up. Attempting to break the eclipse curse without proper preparation could kill her, Your Majesty. The curse has only grown stronger over the centuries. Which is precisely why we must act now, Lady Freya, Reaver countered. Moonhold weakens, the Moon Pact phrase. If the prophecy is true, Diana may be our last hope to restore what was lost. Diana found her voice at last. Don't I have any say in this? All eyes turned to her in surprise. Apparently Omegas, even those of royal blood, were not expected to speak during council meetings. Reaver's expression softened slightly. What would you have us do, Diana Winters? She straightened her shoulders, drawing strength from some unknown reserve. I want to know everything. About Luna, about the curse, about why my grandmother had the moon fang. I want to understand what I am and what's expected of me. She met Reaver's silver gaze directly. Then I will decide what role I'm willing to play in your prophecy. A smile tugged at the corner of Reaver's mouth, the first genuine smile she had seen from him. Fair enough, Lord Fenris leaned forward. And if you decide against helping us, the fate of all wolf-kind hangs in the balance. Diana turned to the grizzled counselor. Then I would be no different from any other Omega you would have let die in the snow. But at least it would be my choice, A stunned silence followed her words. Then unexpectedly, General Alaric, who had been standing silently behind Reaver's chair, let out a short bark of laughter. She has Luna's spirit, if nothing else, he commented, earning a sharp look from Reaver. The council meeting concluded shortly after, with arrangements made for Diana's education and training to begin the following day. As the members filed out, many cast curious glances her way, some respectful, others suspicious. Lady Alara brushed past without acknowledgement, her back rigid with hostility. Cyrus remained behind with Diana and Reaver, his weathered face thoughtful. There is much to prepare. The archives must be opened, trainers arranged. I will oversee her initial training myself, Reaver stated, surprising both Cyrus and Diana. Your Majesty, Cyrus began hesitantly, with your duties to the 7 territories are secondary to this. Reaver cut him off. If Diana truly carries Luna's blood, then awakening her power takes precedence over all else. He turned to Diana. We begin at dawn, the eastern courtyard. With that abrupt dismissal, he strode from the chamber, leaving Diana alone with Cyrus. Is he always so commanding? Cyrus supplied with a small smile. Yes, though I haven't seen him this animated in decades. The old advisor studied her thoughtfully. You made quite an impression, standing up to the council as you did. I spoke without thinking, Diana admitted. In Silver Moon, an Omega who questioned authority would be severely punished. Moonhold is not Silver Moon, Cyrus replied, and you are not merely an Omega anymore. You are Luna's blood. That carries both privilege and peril. He offered his arm once more. Come, you should rest. Tomorrow will test you in ways you cannot imagine. Dawn came too quickly. Diana had spent much of the night poring over the book Cyrus had left for her, ancient texts detailing the history of the 7 territories, the Moon Pact, and the royal bloodlines. She had barely scratched the surface when exhaustion claimed her. Now, as she made her way to the eastern courtyard, the rising sun cast long shadows across Moonhold's ancient stones. The fortress seemed different in daylight, less magical perhaps, but no less imposing. The signs of decay she had noticed the previous day were even more apparent now, cracks in the stonework, darkened patches where the luminescence had failed. The eastern courtyard was a large, open space surrounded by high walls. Training equipment, wooden practice weapons, targets, and obstacle courses lined the perimeter. In the center stood Reaver Blackthorn, his back to her, dressed not in royal finery, but in simple black training clothes that emphasized his powerful build. You're late, he said, without turning. Diana bristled. The sun has barely cleared the horizon. I said dawn, not sunrise. He turned to face her, silver eyes assessing. The first lesson, precision matters. In language, in action, in control, especially for those with power. Diana had exchanged the royal gown for simpler attire provided by the servants, leggings, a tunic, and soft leather boots suitable for training. She felt more comfortable in these clothes, more like herself. What exactly will we be doing? She asked, approaching cautiously. Testing boundaries. Reaver circled her slowly, examining her stance, her posture. Before we can break the seal on your wolf, we must understand its nature. How do we do that? By pushing you to your limits. Without warning, his hand shot out, gripping her shoulder with just enough force to be uncomfortable. What do you feel? Diana tensed at the unexpected contact but forced herself to focus inward. Pressure, mild pain. Deeper, Reaver instructed. Not your human senses. What does the wolf feel? Diana closed her eyes, trying to access something she had never fully experienced. For years, she had been told her wolf was defective, absent. Yet according to Reaver, it was merely sealed away, imprisoned. I don't know how, she admitted after several frustrating minutes. Reaver released her shoulder. The seal is stronger than I anticipated. He stepped back, considering. We'll try a different approach. What triggers a wolf's strongest responses? Danger, Diana answered automatically, remembering her lessons from childhood. Territory, pack, mate. Reaver nodded. Primal instincts that even a sealed wolf would respond to. He drew a dagger from his belt. Not the ceremonial silver blade from the council chamber, but a wicked-looking combat weapon. We'll start with danger. Before Diana could protest, he flipped the dagger and threw it directly at her face. Pure instinct took over. Diana's body moved before her mind could process what was happening, twisting to the side with inhuman speed. The dagger whistled past her ear, embedding itself in the wooden post behind her. She stared at Reaver in shock and outrage. You could have killed me. If I wanted you dead, you would be, he replied calmly. More importantly, you moved with wolf reflexes, not human ones. No Omega without access to their wolf could have dodged that throw. Diana's heart pounded in her chest. He was right. She had moved with a speed and grace she had never possessed before, or perhaps had never been allowed to access. Again, Reaver said, drawing another dagger. For the next hour, he pushed her reflexes to their limit, throwing daggers, swinging practice swords, even hurling small objects from various directions. Each time, Diana responded with increasing confidence, her body seeming to know what to do, even when her mind lagged behind. Good, Reaver finally said, as she caught a small wooden ball he had thrown at her face. Your body remembers what your mind cannot yet access. Diana was breathing hard, but exhilaration coursed through her veins. Never in her life had she felt so physically capable, so connected to her body. This what it feels like? She asked. Having a wolf? A fraction of it, Reaver answered. Now we move to the next trigger. Territory. He led her to the far side of the courtyard, where an archway opened into a smaller private garden. Unlike the martial atmosphere of the training yard, this space was serene, a sanctuary of flowering plants, small trees, and a central pond reflecting the morning sky. This was Luna's garden, Reaver explained, his voice softening almost imperceptibly. No one has tended it properly since she vanished, but it still flourishes. Her power lingers here. Diana felt it immediately upon crossing the threshold, a sense of welcome, of rightness, as if the very air recognized her. The moon fang at her throat warmed against her skin. What do you feel? Reaver asked, watching her closely. Like I belong here, Diana answered honestly. Like the garden knows me. It knows your blood, Reaver corrected. Luna's blood. Even after 2 centuries, her mark remains on this place. He gestured to the center of the garden. Sit by the pool and place your hand in the water. Diana did as instructed, kneeling at the edge of the clear pool. As her fingers broke the surface, ripples spread outward, but not in the normal concentric circles one would expect. Instead, they formed patterns, the same intricate designs that had appeared above the bloodstone. The royal bloodline signature, Reaver murmured, kneeling beside her. The garden recognizes you as its rightful mistress. Diana watched fascinated as the water continued to form impossible patterns around her submerged hand. What does this mean? It means the seal hasn't completely suppressed your heritage. Your blood remembers, even if your wolf remains locked away. Reaver's expression grew thoughtful. It gives us a pathway, a means of communication with your sealed wolf. He reached into the water alongside her, his larger hand near hers but not touching. The patterns shifted, becoming more complex, interweaving around both their hands. Luna and I created this garden together, he said quietly. She infused it with her power, I with mine. It was meant to be a sanctuary, a place where we could escape the burdens of rule. A shadow crossed his face. After she vanished, I could not bear to destroy it, though it pained me to see it. Diana studied him, seeing past the hard exterior to the grief that still lingered after 2 centuries. You truly loved her. It wasn't a question, but Reaver answered anyway. She was my moon-bonded mate, the other half of my soul. His silver eyes met hers. When a true mate bond is severed, it leaves a wound that never fully heals. Then why? Diana began, then stopped herself. Why what? Reaver prompted. She hesitated, then decided honesty was best. Why bring me here to a place that must cause you pain? Why involve yourself directly in my training when surely others could do it? Reaver withdrew his hand from the water, the patterns fading back to normal ripples. Because you are her blood, because the prophecy named you specifically, one of Luna's blood, bearing the moon fang. And because I have waited 200 years for the chance to undo what Eclipse did to us. He stood, a fluid motion that reminded Diana of his predatory grace. The next test will be more challenging. Meet me at the North Tower at midday. Until then, you have free access to Luna's garden. It may help you connect with what lies dormant within you. After Reaver departed, Diana remained by the pool, watching the water return to stillness. She tried to process everything she had learned, about her heritage, about the sealed wolf within her, about Reaver's enduring grief for his lost mate. The garden felt alive around her, responsive to her presence in subtle ways. Flowers turning toward her like she was the sun, breezes carrying scents that seemed intended specifically for her nose. She closed her eyes, trying to feel deeper, to sense the wolf that supposedly slumbered within. "I know you're there," she whispered. "I need you to wake up." Nothing happened, no sudden revelation or magical transformation. Yet Diana felt something, a faint stirring, like the ghost of an echo, deep in her core. Not her wolf awakening, perhaps, but acknowledgement of its existence. It was a start. Midday found Diana climbing the winding stairs of the North Tower, the highest point in Moonhold. The ascent was long, the steps worn smooth by centuries of use. Windows cut into the thick stone walls offered glimpses of the 7 territories spreading out in all directions. Forests, mountains, valleys, and distant settlements, all under Reaver's rule. At the top of the tower, an open platform surrounded by low battlements offered an unobstructed view of the world below. Reaver stood at the edge, hands clasped behind his back, the wind ruffling his dark hair. He did not turn as Diana emerged onto the platform, though she was certain he knew she was there. "The 7 territories," he said, gesturing to the panorama, "forged through blood and sacrifice over a millennium ago when the first moon pact was sealed." Diana joined him at the edge, careful to maintain a respectful distance. The view was breathtaking and terrifying for someone unaccustomed to such heights. She forced herself to look outward rather than down. "What was the moon pact?" she asked. "The books explained it as a covenant between wolves and the moon itself. But how is that possible?" Reaver's silver eyes reflected the midday sun. "The moon is more than just a celestial body. It is a source of ancient power, a gateway between worlds. The first Alpha, my ancestor, discovered a way to harness that power, to create a bond that would elevate wolves above ordinary animals." He pointed to a distant mountain range, jagged peaks cutting into the sky. There, at the highest point of the northern range, the first Alpha performed a ritual under the blood moon. He offered his life essence, not just blood, but something deeper, more fundamental, in exchange for the gift of dual nature. The ability to shift between forms, to carry the strength and instinct of the wolf with the intellect and adaptability of the human. "A bargain with the moon," Diana murmured. "A covenant," Reaver corrected. "The moon demands balance. Power granted must be power maintained through bloodlines, through ritual, through adherence to natural law. For 1,000 years, the royal line has renewed this covenant, strengthening the connection between wolfkind and the moon. Until Eclipse," Diana guessed. Reaver's jaw tightened. She sought to sever the connection, to steal the moon's power for herself and her human followers. When she couldn't break the covenant directly, she targeted its strongest vessel, Luna. He turned to Diana fully now, his expression intense. "The third trigger for a wolf's instinct is pack. I believe your sealed wolf will respond to pack bonds, even if it cannot yet break free." "But I have no pack," Diana reminded him. "I was rejected, cast out." "You have royal blood," Reaver countered, "and the ruler of the 7 territories is, by definition, packed to all who dwell within them." Without warning, he reached out and placed his hand on the back of her neck, an ancient wolf gesture of dominance and protection. Diana froze, instinct screaming at her to submit to the touch of an alpha. But something else rose within her simultaneously. Not resistance exactly, but a refusal to be completely dominated. "Interesting," Reaver murmured, clearly sensing her internal conflict. "Your human mind wants to submit to an alpha. Your sealed wolf recognizes its royal blood and refuses complete submission." He increased the pressure slightly, and Diana felt something crack within her. not physically, but energetically, like a hairline fracture in a dam. Warmth spread from his hand through her body, and for a fleeting moment, she felt it, the presence of her wolf stirring from its enforced slumber. A growl built in her throat, surprising them both. Diana's eyes widened as she felt them change, knew they had shifted from their normal gray to something else, something that made Reaver's own eyes narrow with interest. "Silver," he said quietly, "like the royal line, like Luna's." As quickly as it had come, the semation faded, her wolf retreating back behind its seal. Diana gasped as the connection broke, feeling bereft, as if something precious had been snatched away. "No," she protested, reaching instinctively for the fading presence. "Come back." Reaver's hand remained on her neck, steadying her. "Easy. The seal is powerful. We cannot break it all at once without risking permanent damage." "But I felt her," Diana insisted, the pronoun slipping out naturally. "Just for a moment, I felt my wolf." "Good. That's progress." Reaver released her neck but stayed close. "The seal has weakened. Each time we push against it, cracks will form. Eventually, it will shatter entirely." Diana took a shaky breath, trying to process the experience. "What's the fourth trigger? You mentioned danger, territory, and pack. What's the last one?" Reaver's expression became carefully neutral. "Mate, but that test is unnecessary and inappropriate given the circumstances." Diana felt a flush creep up her neck. Of course, the mate bond was the most intimate connection between wolves, often involving physical claiming. Even in her limited education as an Omega, she knew that much. "What now?" she asked, changing the subject. "Now we continue your training," Reaver answered. "Physical conditioning to strengthen your body for when your wolf emerges. Combat training to protect yourself from Eclipse's agents. And historical education to understand your heritage and the role you may play in fulfilling the prophecy." "And if I choose not to play that role?" Diana challenged, remembering her words to the council. Reaver studied her for a long moment. "Then the 7 territories will eventually fall, Moonhold will crumble, and the last vestiges of the Moon Pact will dissolve. Eclipse will have won 2 centuries after her apparent defeat." The blunt assessment hung in the air between them. "No pressure," Diana thought wryly. "Let's continue," she said finally. "I want to feel my wolf again." A hint of approval flickered in Reaver's silver eyes. "We begin combat training tomorrow. For now, return to Luna's garden. Meditate by the pool. Try to reach your wolf through the cracks we've created." As Diana turned to leave, a distant sound caught her attention. A horn blast from somewhere far below. Reaver's head snapped up, his posture instantly alert. "What is it?" Diana asked. "Border alarm," he answered tersely. "The Northern Watch has spotted intruders." He moved past her toward the stairs. "Return to your chambers and remain there until I send word." "But my training will resume when I determine it is safe." His tone brooked no argument. "Moonhold is secure, but I must investigate this breach personally." Diana watched him descend the tower stairs with swift efficiency, leaving her alone with a vast view and a growing sense of unease. Something in Reaver's reaction suggested this was no ordinary border crossing. She touched the moonfang at her throat, feeling its warmth against her skin. "What have I gotten myself into?" she whispered to the empty air. The next 3 days passed in a blur of intensive training. Despite the border alarm, Reaver returned by nightfall and resumed Diana's education the following morning, as if nothing had happened. He refused to discuss the intruders, saying only that the situation had been addressed. Combat training proved both exhausting and exhilarating. Diana discovered that her body remembered skills her mind had never learned, as if the royal blood in her veins carried muscle memory passed down through generations. With each passing day, she grew stronger, faster, more confident in her movements. The crack in her wolf's seal widened incrementally. Brief moments of connection became longer, allowing Diana fleeting communion with the creature that shared her soul. She caught glimpses of silver fur, felt the power of 4 strong limbs, experienced the heightened senses that would one day be fully hers. On the 4th morning, as she prepared for another training session, a knock at her chamber door revealed not Reaver, but General Alaric. "The king has been called away on urgent business," he announced without preamble. "He has instructed me to continue your combat training in his absence." Diana frowned. What urgent business? Alaric's green eyes narrowed slightly. That information is not relevant to your training. It might be relevant to me, Diana countered, especially if it concerns the intruders from 3 days ago. A flicker of surprise crossed Alaric's face, quickly masked. You are perceptive, Lady Diana. But my orders stand. Training continues regardless of the king's presence. Diana considered refusing, but curiosity won out. Training with Alaric might provide insights that Reaver would never willingly share. The general proved to be a demanding instructor, perhaps even more so than Reaver. Where the king had been stern but patient, Alaric pushed relentlessly, accepting no excuses and showing no mercy when Diana failed to meet his expectations. By midday, she was bruised, sweating, and thoroughly irritated with her new trainer. Again, Alaric commanded after she had fallen for the 5th time attempting to block his attack. I need water, Diana protested, wiping sweat from her brow. Eclipse's agents won't give you a water break when they come for your head, Alaric retorted. Again. Diana glared at him but resumed her stance. This time when Alaric attacked, something inside her snapped. Not her wolf emerging, but pure human frustration reaching its limit. She ducked under his swing, dropped to the ground, and swept his legs out from under him with a move he hadn't taught her. One she somehow simply knew. The general hit the ground hard, genuine surprise registering on his face before he controlled his expression. Where did you learn that? Diana stood over him, as shocked as he was. I don't know, it just happened. Alaric climbed to his feet, studying her with new interest. Muscle memory. The royal blood remembers what the mind does not. He brushed dirt from his training clothes. Perhaps you're not entirely hopeless after all. Coming from him, it was practically effusive praise. Now tell me where Reaver really went, Diana pressed, seizing the moment. Alaric's expression closed again. That is not part of my training. Yes, I know, Diana interrupted, but it might be part of who I am, of my heritage. If it involves Eclipse, don't I deserve to know? The general considered her for a long moment. You're persistent, a trait Reaver finds either admirable or infuriating, depending on the day. He sighed. Very well. Limited information only, and you did not hear it from me. Diana nodded eagerly. The border breach 3 days ago was not random, Alaric explained. Our scouts identified the intruders as Eclipse cultists, humans who follow her teachings and believe she will return to elevate humanity above wolfkind. Diana frowned. I thought Eclipse was defeated centuries ago. Defeated but not destroyed, Alaric corrected. Like Reaver, she was more than mortal. The battle between her and Luna ended with Eclipse grievously wounded and Luna vanished. But Eclipse's followers have maintained her cult throughout the centuries, waiting for signs of her return. And they have seen such signs now? Alaric nodded grimly. Increased activity over the past year. Small incursions into wolf territory, ancient sites desecrated, ritual objects stolen. And now, he hesitated, clearly debating how much to reveal. Now what? Diana prompted. 3 days ago, the intruders were carrying a specific target map, a map of Silver Moon territory with your grandmother's cottage marked. Alaric watched her reaction closely. They were looking for the Moonfang, or for you. Diana felt cold despite the exertion of training. How could they know about me? About the Moonfang? That's what Reaver has gone to discover, Alaric replied. He traveled to Silver Moon territory to investigate personally, to determine if there are Eclipse sympathizers within the pack itself. Lord Garrick, Diana whispered, remembering her rejected mate. Could he be involved? Unknown, Alaric said, but Reaver will find the truth. He always does. The training session resumed with renewed intensity, but Diana's mind raced with questions. If Eclipse's followers had targeted her grandmother's cottage, did that mean her grandmother had been hiding from them all along? Had she known the danger the Moonfang represented? By evening, Diana was exhausted both physically and mentally. She retired to Luna's garden, seeking the peace she had found there in previous days. The garden recognized her now, responding to her presence with subtle changes. Flowers turning toward her, branches bending to provide shade. The water in the pool rippling in greeting. She knelt by the pool, placing her hand in the cool water and watching the familiar patterns form around her fingers. What secrets did you keep? she asked aloud, thinking of her grandmother. Why didn't you tell me who I was? What I was? The water offered no answers, only endless, hypnotic patterns that gradually lulled Diana into a meditative state. She closed her eyes, focusing inward, seeking the cracks in the seal that imprisoned her wolf. I know you're there, she whispered. I need to understand what's happening. Help me. To her surprise, she felt an immediate response, a surge of warmth from within, a presence pressing against the barriers that separated them. Her wolf responding to her call. Diana pushed mentally against the seal, using techniques Reaver had taught her. The cracks widened, allowing more connection than ever before. Not enough for a full awakening, but enough for images flooded her mind. Not her own memories, but something older, passed down through blood and bone. A woman with silver eyes and flowing black hair, standing beneath a full moon. The same woman facing another female figure, wreathed in shadow and flame. A battle of wills, of powers, of fundamental forces. Luna and eclipse. The images shifted, became more chaotic. Pain, desperation, a choice made in extremis. The Moonfang, passing from hand to hand through generations, always hidden, always protected. A final image, her grandmother as a young woman, fleeing through a midnight forest. The Moonfang clutched to her chest, terror and determination on her face. Diana gasped as the connection broke, the wolf retreating behind its damaged but still formidable seal. She found herself lying beside the pool, soaked with sweat despite the cool evening air. Luna didn't die in that battle, she whispered to herself, the revelation clear in her mind. She escaped somehow, and passed the Moonfang down through her descendants, hiding it from eclipse. Which meant her grandmother wasn't just of Luna's bloodline, she might have been Luna's daughter. And Diana herself could be. The thought was too overwhelming to complete. She needed more information, more certainty before jumping to such a monumental conclusion. Rising on shaky legs, Diana made her way back to the main fortress. If answers existed anywhere, they would be in the royal archives Reaver had mentioned. It was time to do some research of her own, with or without the king's guidance. The royal archives occupied an entire wing of Moonhold's lowest level, a vast labyrinth of shelves and cases containing scrolls, books, and artifacts spanning a millennium of wolf history. Diana had expected guards or restrictions, but to her surprise, the massive doors stood open, and the elderly archivist merely nodded respectfully when she explained her purpose. The king left explicit instructions, the old wolf explained. You are to have unrestricted access to all records pertaining to Queen Luna and the royal bloodline. For hours, Diana lost herself in the ancient text, piecing together the history of Luna Blackthorn and her fateful confrontation with Eclipse. The official records were frustratingly vague about Luna's fate, stating only that she had vanished following the battle, with no body ever recovered. Most assumed she had died, her remains perhaps destroyed by Eclipse's power. But scattered among the formal histories were personal accounts, journals kept by those who had known Luna, including several entries by Reaver himself. His grief was palpable even across centuries, his refusal to accept her death evident in entry after entry, describing searches, investigations, consultations with seers and mystics. One journal entry, dated nearly 50 years after Luna's disappearance, caught Diana's attention. The seer from the Eastern Territories claims Luna lives, hidden beyond my reach. I want to believe, yet each false hope cuts deeper than the last. Still, the Moonfang has never returned to me, as it would if she were truly gone. Somewhere, she or her blood still carries it. I will not rest until I find it. Find her, even if it takes centuries. Diana traced her fingers over Reaver's handwriting, feeling the depth of his loss across time. What would it be like to love someone so completely that 2 centuries of separation did nothing to diminish the bond? Further research revealed details about Luna herself, her powers, her personality, her role in strengthening the Moon Pact. By all accounts, she had been extraordinary, not just royal by blood, but genuinely beloved by the 7 territories. Her disappearance had marked the beginning of a slow decline in wolf power, the first cracks in Moonhold's luminescent walls, the gradual weakening of the bond between wolves and moon. Dawn was breaking by the time Diana finally emerged from the archives, her mind full of new information, but still missing crucial pieces of the puzzle. She made her way to Luna's garden, drawn there by some instinct she couldn't name. The garden looked different in the early morning light, the flowers opening to greet the sun, dew glistening on every surface. Diana sat by the pool, too tired to meditate but too restless to sleep. "I wish you could just tell me," she said aloud, unsure if she was addressing Luna, her grandmother, or her sealed wolf. "Tell you what?" Diana started at the unexpected voice. Reaver stood at the garden's entrance, travel-worn and grim-faced. He must have returned sometime during the night. "The truth about my grandmother," Diana answered honestly. "About why she had the moonfang. About who I really am." Reaver approached slowly, his expression unreadable. "And what conclusions have you reached?" Diana met his silver gaze directly. "My grandmother wasn't just of Luna's bloodline. I think she might have been Luna's daughter, which would make me Luna's granddaughter," Reaver finished, his voice carefully neutral. "Or great-granddaughter, depending on the exact lineage." Diana's heart pounded. "Is it true?" Reaver knelt beside her at the pool's edge, placing his hand in the water. The patterns formed immediately, intertwining with the ones created by Diana's own submerged fingers. "I believe so," he said finally. "My investigation at Silver Moon territory confirmed what I suspected. Your grandmother arrived there 40 years ago, already mature, but not elderly. Before that, she lived in the deep forest beyond the Silver Mountains, precisely where Luna was last seen." "Why didn't you tell me this possibility from the beginning?" Diana demanded. "Because certainty matters," Reaver replied. "I have followed false leads for 2 centuries, Diana. I needed proof before offering you a heritage that might not be yours to claim." "And did you find such proof in Silver Moon territory?" Reaver nodded slowly. "Your former Pack Alpha kept detailed records. Your grandmother's arrival coincides with reports of strange lights in the deep forest, the same phenomena that have historically accompanied manifestations of Luna's power." He withdrew a small object from his pocket, a carved wooden figure of a wolf, small enough to fit in the palm of his hand. "This was found among your grandmother's creations after her death. The Pack Alpha kept it, sensing its importance without understanding why." Diana took the carving, turning it over in her hands. It seemed ordinary enough until she noticed tiny marks carved into the bottom, the same symbols that adorned the moonfang. "I made this," Reaver said quietly, "for Luna, when we first bonded. She carried it always." Diana stared at the small wolf, then at Reaver, a terrible suspicion forming in her mind. "If Luna was my grandmother's mother, and you were Luna's mate—" "I am not your grandfather, if that's what you're asking," Reaver interrupted, something like pain flashing across his features. "Luna and I had no children in our centuries together. Her pregnancy, if she was indeed pregnant when she disappeared, came after our separation." Relief flooded Diana, followed immediately by confusion. "Then who—" "I don't know," Reaver admitted, "but I intend to find out." He stood, offering her his hand. "Come. You need rest, and I must report to the council about my findings at Silver Moon." Diana took his hand, allowing him to help her to her feet. The contact sent a jolt of awareness through her body, her partially awakened wolf responding to his presence in ways her human mind wasn't ready to analyze. "Will you tell the council your suspicions about my lineage?" she asked as they walked toward the fortress. "Not yet," Reaver decided. "The implications are too significant. The evidence still circumstantial. We need more certainty before making such claims public." Diana nodded, grateful for his caution. The weight of royal blood was heavy enough already without adding the possibility of being Luna's direct descendant. As they reached the entrance to the royal wing, Reaver stopped. "Rest today. Tomorrow we intensify your training. The seal on your wolf is weakening, but not quickly enough. Eclipse's followers are moving with purpose, which suggests a timetable." "What kind of timetable?" Reaver's expression darkened. "The cultists I interrogated spoke of an approaching celestial event, a lunar eclipse that will mirror the one during which Luna disappeared. They believe it will enable Eclipse's return." "When?" 30 days from now," Reaver answered grimly. "Which means we have 1 month to fully awaken your wolf and prepare you for whatever role you must play in what's coming." With that sobering thought, he left her at her chamber door. Diana entered the room that had once belonged to Luna, to her possible great-grandmother, and collapsed onto the bed, her mind racing despite her exhaustion. 1 month to master powers she barely understood. 1 month to prepare for a confrontation with an enemy who had nearly destroyed the 7 territories 2 centuries ago. 1 month to decide if she would embrace the destiny that seemed increasingly unavoidable. As sleep finally claimed her, Diana's last conscious thought was of her grandmother, the woman who had raised her, protected her, and kept the truth of her heritage secret until the very end. Had she known this day would come? Had she prepared Diana in ways too subtle to recognize until now? And most importantly, had she made the right choice in keeping Diana ignorant of her true nature for so long? The answers, if they existed at all, would have to wait for another day. The ancient stones of Moonhold whispered with forgotten memories as dawn broke over the northern territories. Diana stood at the window of Luna's chambers, watching as the first golden rays illuminated the fortress walls. 20 days had passed since her conversation with Reaver in Luna's garden. 20 days of relentless training, of pushing against the seal that imprisoned her wolf, of preparing for a confrontation that grew more inevitable with each passing sunset. Only 10 days remained before the prophesied eclipse. Diana's body had changed during these weeks of intense preparation. Lean muscle now defined her once soft frame, calluses hardened hands that had never known combat. Most significantly, her eyes now flashed silver whenever her emotions ran high, brief glimpses of the royal wolf struggling to break free. A knock at her door announced Cyrus, the elderly advisor, having become a daily presence in her new routine. "The council awaits, Lady Diana." She nodded, adjusting the formal attire that still felt foreign despite weeks of wear. Gone was the rejected Omega in rags. In her place stood a woman of presence and growing power. The moonfang gleamed at her throat, warmer and more responsive with each passing day. "Has Reaver returned?" she asked as they walked the corridor toward the council chamber. Cyrus shook his head. "Not yet. 3 days now with no word." Concern flickered across Diana's face. Since confirming his suspicions about her lineage, Reaver had intensified not only her training, but also his investigations into Eclipse's cult. His latest journey had taken him to the Eastern Territories, following rumors of unusual activity near an ancient ritual site. "General Alaric will oversee today's council session," Cyrus explained, his weathered face betraying no emotion. "Lady Alara has prepared a formal objection to your continued presence at Moonhold." Diana wasn't surprised. Despite her progress and the growing acceptance from most council members, Lady Alara's hostility had only intensified over the past weeks. The beautiful, ambitious noblewoman clearly viewed Diana as a threat to her own carefully cultivated position. "On what grounds?" Diana asked, mentally preparing for yet another confrontation. "The usual, questioning your bloodline, your worthiness, your commitment to the 7 territories." Cyrus's eyes held a hint of amusement. "She becomes more predictable as she grows more desperate." The council chamber fell silent as Diana entered. 12 pairs of eyes tracked her movement to her designated seat, a chair placed symbolically at Reaver's right hand, though the king's own seat remained conspicuously empty today. General Alaric stood at the head of the table, his warrior's posture unyielding as he called the session to order. Diana noticed the dark circles beneath his eyes, evidence that she wasn't the only one concerned about Reaver's extended absence. "Before we address regular council business," Alaric began, "Lady Alara has requested time to present a formal petition." Lady Alara rose gracefully, her beauty as striking as her ambition. Her gown of deep crimson seemed chosen specifically to stand apart from the midnight blue that had become Diana's signature color. "Esteemed council members," she began, her melodious voice carrying easily in the chamber's perfect acoustics. "For over 20 days now, we have indulged this guest in our midst. We have provided royal accommodations, access to our most sacred archives, and personal training from the king himself." Her gaze swept the table, carefully avoiding Diana. "Yet what evidence have we seen that Diana Winters is truly the savior spoken of in the prophecy? What assurance do we have that she is not merely an opportunist who happened upon a valuable artifact?" Murmurs rippled around the table. Lady Alara pressed her advantage. "The king himself remains unconvinced of her exact lineage, or he would have declared it formally." Meanwhile, Eclipse's followers grow bolder. "The celestial event approaches. We cannot afford to place our faith in an unproven Omega from a backwater pack." Diana remained silent, watching the reactions of the other council members. Some nodded in agreement with Alara, but others frowned, clearly uncomfortable with the direct challenge. "What exactly are you proposing, Lady Alara?" Lord Fenris asked, his gruff voice cutting through the whispers. Alara smiled, the expression not reaching her eyes. "A formal test of worthiness. If Diana Winters truly carries royal blood, if she truly holds the power to fulfill the prophecy, let her prove it before the full council." "In what form would this test take?" Alaric asked, suspicion evident in his tone. "The trial of the four elements," Alara answered smoothly, "ancient, irrefutable, and bound by the original moon pact itself." Gasps echoed through the chamber. Even Cyrus looked startled, his usual composed demeanor cracking slightly. "The trial of four elements hasn't been invoked in 3 centuries, he objected. "The danger is considerable," Alara interrupted, "as is the danger of following a false prophet into confrontation with eclipse. If Diana Winters truly possesses the power to save us, surely she can pass a traditional royal test." All eyes turned to Diana, who maintained her composure despite her internal confusion. She had never heard of this trial, had encountered no mention of it in her research. "I will need clarification on what this trial entails before accepting such a challenge," she said calmly, refusing to be baited into an impulsive response. "Of course you would," Alara replied with mock sympathy. "Allow me to educate you. The trial of four elements tests a claimant's connection to the primal forces that underpin the moon pact: earth, air, fire, and water. Each element presents a challenge that only true royal blood can overcome. Failure means rejection of your claim. Success means—" She paused, something calculating in her gaze. "Success means even I would kneel before you." The chamber fell silent as the council awaited Diana's response. She weighed her options carefully. Refusing would play into Alara's narrative that she was an imposter. Accepting meant facing an unknown test that clearly worried even Cyrus. Before she could respond, the chamber doors swung open with a bang. Reaver Blackthorn strode in, his travel clothes dusty, his expression thunderous. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees as he took in the scene before him. "What is this?" he demanded, silver eyes fixing on Alara. "A council matter being handled in your absence, Your Majesty," she replied smoothly, though Diana noticed her confidence waver slightly under Reaver's intense scrutiny. "A council matter," Reaver repeated, his voice deceptively soft. "Calling for the trial of four elements without royal sanction is not a council matter, Lady Alara. It is treason." Alara paled. "Treason is a severe accusation, Your Majesty. I merely suggested a traditional means of verification." "You suggested a trial that has killed half the wolves who ever attempted it," Reaver cut her off. "A trial reserved exclusively for succession disputes, which this is not." He moved to the head of the table, and Alaric immediately vacated the position, bowing deeply. Reaver surveyed the assembled council, his displeasure evident. "This session is adjourned," he declared. "Lady Diana, General Alaric, Lord Cyrus, attend me in the war room immediately. The rest of you are dismissed." The council members filed out quickly, none willing to test Reaver's obvious anger. Lady Alara lingered, clearly hoping to explain herself further, but a single look from the king sent her hurrying after the others. Once they were alone in the corridor, Diana found her voice. "What is the trial of four elements? Why was everyone so shocked by her suggestion?" "Because it's not a test," Reaver answered grimly, striding toward the war room with Diana and the others following closely. "It's an execution disguised as a trial, historically used to eliminate legitimate claimants to the throne by forcing them into challenges designed to be fatal." "But why would the council allow such a thing?" "Desperation makes for strange alliances," Alaric answered. "And Lady Alara has spent decades cultivating friendships among the more conservative council members. Some genuinely fear that your arrival threatens the established order." The war room was a large circular chamber dominated by a massive three-dimensional map of the 7 territories. Glowing markers indicated settlements, patrol routes, and, most concerning, a growing number of red indicators that Diana recognized as sites of eclipse cult activity. Reaver locked the door behind them, then turned to face the small group. "We have a traitor in our midst." The blunt declaration hung in the air. Alaric's hand moved instinctively to his weapon, while Cyrus sank heavily into a chair, looking suddenly every year of his considerable age. "You're certain?" the old advisor asked quietly. Reaver nodded, his expression grave. My journey to the Eastern Territories confirmed it. Eclipse's followers knew of Diana's lineage before I did. They knew of the Moonfang's location at Silver Moon Territory, and they know details of our preparations here at Moonhold that could only have come from someone with direct access to the council. Lady Alara, Diana guessed, remembering the noblewoman's growing hostility. Perhaps, Reaver acknowledged, but we must be careful not to accuse without proof. Eclipse's agents are masters of misdirection. He approached the map, pointing to a specific location in the mountainous region north of Moonhold. The cult has established a primary ritual site here, at the Blackstone Altar, the same location where Luna confronted Eclipse 2 centuries ago. Alaric leaned in, studying the marker. Your reports mentioned increased activity, but this? He gestured to the dozens of red indicators surrounding the site. This suggests an army forming. Not just an army, Reaver corrected, a convergence. Eclipse's followers believe the upcoming lunar eclipse will create a window, a moment when the barriers between worlds thin enough for her to return physically. Return from where? Diana asked. I thought she was merely wounded in the battle with Luna, not destroyed. Reaver's silver eyes met hers. Eclipse was neither destroyed nor simply wounded. She was banished, cast into a prison dimension by Luna's final spell, a spell that apparently required tremendous sacrifice. Understanding dawned on Diana. Luna's disappearance. She didn't die or flee. She sacrificed herself to banish Eclipse. Reaver nodded, pain flashing across his features. That is my belief, based on what I've learned. The Moonfang was the key to the spell, both lock and key. In the hands of Luna's bloodline, it maintains the barrier between worlds, keeping Eclipse imprisoned. And if Eclipse's followers gain possession of it, Cyrus asked, they could use it to reverse the spell, freeing their mistress and dooming the 7 territories. Reaver answered grimly, which is why they have hunted Luna's descendants for 2 centuries. Diana touched the Moonfang at her throat, feeling its warmth pulse in time with her heartbeat. My grandmother knew this. She kept moving, kept hiding to protect the Moonfang. And to protect you, Alaric added, if you truly are Luna's direct descendant, your blood combined with the Moonfang would be Eclipse's surest path to freedom. The implications settled heavily on Diana's shoulders. Her grandmother hadn't merely been hiding an artifact, she had been protecting the world from catastrophe, carrying a burden that had now passed to Diana herself. The eclipse is in 10 days, Reaver said, drawing their attention back to the map. We have intelligence suggesting the cult will perform their ritual at midnight, when the eclipse reaches totality. We must be prepared to stop them. How? Diana asked. My wolf is still sealed, my powers largely inaccessible. What can I possibly do against an ancient evil and her army of fanatics? Reaver's expression hardened with resolve. We accelerate your training. The seal has weakened considerably over these past weeks. I believe we can break it completely before the eclipse. And if we can't, Diana pressed, needing honesty more than comfort. Reaver exchanged glances with Alaric and Cyrus before answering. Then we fall back to our contingency plan. We take the Moonfang beyond Eclipse's reach, to the sacred pool beneath Moonhold, where the original Moon Pact was sealed. There, even without your wolf fully awakened, you might be able to access enough of Luna's power to reinforce the barriers between worlds. Diana absorbed this information, her mind racing with questions and fears. And what of the traitor? If someone is feeding information to Eclipse's cult, they'll know of any plan we make here. Which is why, starting now, our true plans remain among the 4 of us only, Reaver decided. To the Council and the rest of Moonhold, we will appear to be preparing a defensive strategy. In reality, he paused, his silver eyes meeting each of theirs in turn. In reality, we take the fight to them, before they can complete their ritual. An offensive, Alaric nodded, the warrior in him approving of the strategy. Strike first, with full force. Not full force, Reaver corrected. A small, elite team capable of infiltrating their gathering undetected. Myself, Alaric, Diana, and a few of our most trusted soldiers. And me, Cyrus added firmly. My old bones may not be much use in a fight, but my knowledge of ancient rituals might prove valuable. Reaver didn't argue, merely inclining his head in acknowledgement of the old advisor's courage. We have 10 days to prepare, he summarized. Diana's training takes priority. Alaric, select the soldiers, no more than 5, all personally vouched for. Cyrus, research everything we have on the Blackstone altar and the original confrontation. I want to know exactly what we're walking into. As the others nodded their understanding, Diana felt the weight of expectation settling on her shoulders. 10 days to master powers she barely understood. 10 days to prepare for a confrontation that would determine the fate of the 7 territories. 10 days to become the weapon Luna had apparently designed her to be. The following morning found Diana in the training yard before dawn, pushing her body to its limits under Reaver's watchful eye. Her muscles burned, sweat soaked her training clothes, but she refused to yield. With each passing day, the seal on her wolf weakened further, allowing more of her true nature to emerge. Again, Reaver commanded after she completed a particularly grueling sequence of combat moves. Diana wiped sweat from her brow, forcing her breathing to steady. Is this really necessary? I thought breaking the seal was about mental and spiritual connection, not physical exhaustion. The seal binds your wolf on multiple levels, Reaver explained, circling her with predatory grace. Physical, mental, spiritual. We must attack all 3 simultaneously if we hope to shatter it completely before the eclipse. He lunged suddenly, faster than human eyes could track. Diana's body responded instinctively, twisting away from his attack with inhuman speed. As she moved, something shifted inside her, the seal cracking further, allowing a surge of power to flow through her limbs. For a brief, glorious moment, her vision altered. The world appeared sharper, colors more vivid, scents more distinct. Her wolf pressing against the weakening barriers, sharing its senses with her. The moment passed, leaving Diana gasping not from exertion, but from the intensity of the experience. You felt it, Reaver observed, silver eyes studying her closely. Yes, Diana confirmed. It's getting stronger, closer to the surface. Good. He retrieved a wooden practice sword, tossing it to her. Again. This time, don't just react. Reach for that power. Pull it toward you. For hours they trained, pushing Diana's body to its breaking point, while simultaneously teaching her to access the wolf's power that simmered just beyond her reach. By midday, she could maintain the heightened senses for several minutes at a time, though full transformation remained frustratingly elusive. They paused briefly for water, Diana gulping thirstily from a skin, while Reaver observed her progress. You've come far in a short time, he acknowledged, rare approval in his tone. Few wolves with functioning connections to their animal side master control as quickly as you have with a sealed wolf. Luna's blood, Diana suggested, wiping her mouth with the back of her hand. Perhaps, Reaver agreed, but there is also your will, your determination. Not all who carry royal blood possess the strength of character to wield it effectively. Coming from the usually taciturn king, the praise meant more than Diana cared to admit. These past weeks had changed her relationship with Reaver in subtle ways. The initial fear and awe had given way to something more complex, respect, certainly, but also a growing connection that neither of them acknowledged directly. What was she like? Diana asked suddenly. Luna, not just as a queen or as your mate, but as a person. Reaver went still, his silver eyes growing distant with memory. For a moment, Diana thought he might ignore the question entirely. She was stubborn, he said finally, his voice softer than usual, fierce in her convictions. She loved music, would spend hours playing the harp in her chambers when she thought no one was listening. She had a temper that could rival my own, but also a capacity for forgiveness that I never mastered. He looked away, gazing toward the distant mountains. She laughed easily, found joy in small things, made this fortress feel like a home rather than a military stronghold. Diana absorbed these details, trying to build a picture of the woman whose blood she carried, the woman who might have been her great-grandmother. Do I remind you of her? She asked quietly. Reaver's gaze returned to her, something unreadable in his silver eyes. In some ways, your determination, your adaptability, but you are your own person, Diana Winters. Never doubt that. The moment stretched between them, charged with something neither was prepared to name. Then Reaver straightened, his expression returning to its usual impassivity. Enough rest. We continue with the next phase of training. The afternoon session focused on mental disciplines, meditation techniques designed to strengthen Diana's connection to her sealed wolf. Seated in Luna's garden, beside the reflecting pool that responded so readily to her blood, Diana turned her consciousness inward, seeking the presence that grew stronger with each passing day. Reaver's deep voice guided her, a steady anchor in the internal landscape. Find the barriers. See them not as walls, but as veils, thin, permeable, already weakened by our efforts. Diana visualized the seal as she had come to understand it. Not a solid wall, but a complex lattice of magical constraints, cracked and fragile after weeks of sustained pressure. Behind it waited her wolf, silver and magnificent, watching her with ancient eyes that held knowledge beyond Diana's comprehension. I can see her, Diana whispered, lost in the internal vision. She's waiting for me. Reach for her, Reaver instructed, not with force, but with invitation. The wolf is not separate from you. It is you, your truest self, artificially divided by Eclipse's curse. Diana extended her consciousness toward the wolf, feeling an immediate response. Eagerness, recognition, a desperate longing for reunion. The barriers between them shimmered, grew translucent in places where the cracks had widened. For the first time, Diana could truly communicate with her wolf, not just sense its presence, but share thoughts, feelings, even fragmented memories passed down through blood and bone. Images flashed through her mind. Luna standing proud beneath a full moon, her silver eyes glowing with power. The same woman facing a figure wreathed in shadow and flame, determination and sacrifice in her expression. The Moonfang, passing from hand to hand through generations, always hidden, always protected. Then came newer memories, her grandmother's face, younger than Diana had ever known her, fierce and protective as she fled through a midnight forest. The small cottage in Silver Moon territory, warded with subtle protections, visible only to those with the sight to perceive them. She knew, Diana gasped, the revelation hitting her with physical force. My grandmother knew exactly who she was, who I would be. She prepared me without ever telling me. What do you see? Reaver asked, his voice seeming to come from a great distance. Memories, not mine, hers, the wolf's, passed down through the bloodline. Diana struggled to articulate the flood of images and sensations. My grandmother was teaching me, all those years, little things that didn't make sense then. Herb lore, star navigation, ancient wolf legends I thought were just bedtime stories. She opened her eyes, breaking the deep meditative state, but holding on to the connection with her wolf. She was training me to survive what was coming. She knew I would eventually carry the Moonfang. Knew Eclipse's followers would find me someday. Reaver nodded, unsurprised. A wise precaution. Even without your wolf awakened, those skills might mean the difference between success and failure in the days ahead. The sun had begun its descent toward the western mountains, casting long shadows across the garden. Diana realized they had been training for nearly 12 hours straight, her body and mind pushed to their absolute limits. Rest, Reaver commanded, seeing her exhaustion. Tomorrow we continue with the final phase, spiritual connection, the deepest and most challenging aspect of breaking the seal. Diana nodded, too tired to argue. As she rose to leave, Reaver's voice stopped her. Diana. He rarely used her name, the intimacy of it somehow more significant than any title he might bestow. What you accomplished today, maintaining connection with your sealed wolf, accessing ancestral memories, it would be remarkable even for a royal wolf without such constraints. You have exceeded every expectation. The unexpected praise warmed her more than she cared to admit. Thank you, I had a good teacher. A ghost of a smile touched his lips, there and gone, so quickly she might have imagined it. Tomorrow, dawn. Be prepared for the hardest day yet. The predicted challenge materialized in unexpected form. When Diana arrived at the training yard the following morning, she found not just Reaver, but a small gathering of wolves. Alaric, Cyrus, and 5 soldiers she recognized as members of Reaver's personal guard. What's this? She asked, immediately wary. The final phase of your training, Reaver answered. Breaking a seal this powerful requires more than individual effort. It requires pack energy, the combined will of multiple wolves focused on a single purpose. Diana glanced at the assembled group. They're going to help break my seal? They're going to help you break your seal, Reaver corrected. The power must come from within you, but they can create a channel, a pathway that makes the process less traumatic. The word choice wasn't reassuring. Traumatic how exactly? Cyrus stepped forward, his elderly face solemn. The final breaking of a seal of this magnitude is intensely painful, Lady Diana. Without support, the shock alone could kill you. With a pack connection, the burden is shared, making survival more likely. More likely, Diana repeated flatly, but not guaranteed. Nothing involving power of this magnitude comes with guarantees, Reaver said bluntly, but this is our best chance to awaken your wolf fully before confronting Eclipse's cult. Diana considered her options, though in truth she had already made her decision days ago. The fate of the 7 territories, perhaps the world itself, hung in the balance. Her personal safety seemed insignificant by comparison. What do I need to do? She asked, squaring her shoulders. Relief flickered briefly across Reaver's face before his expression returned to its usual stoicism. The ritual requires sacred ground. We'll conduct it in the chamber beneath Moonhold, the birthplace of the original Moon Pact. Diana had heard of this chamber but never visited it. According to legend, it housed a pool of liquid moonlight, the physical manifestation of the covenant between wolves and the celestial powers. The small group proceeded in silence through Moonhold's winding corridors, descending staircases so ancient the steps had worn into shallow curves from centuries of use. The air grew cooler, charged with a strange energy that made the hairs on Diana's arms stand on end. Finally, they reached a massive door of silver and stone, marked with the phases of the moon. Reaver placed his hand upon the central full moon symbol, and the door swung inward silently, revealing a cavern of breathtaking beauty. The chamber was vaulted, its ceiling lost in shadows high above. Natural pillars of crystal rose from floor to ceiling, catching and refracting light from the chamber's central feature. A circular pool that glowed with silver-blue radiance, casting rippling patterns across the stone walls. The moon pool, Cyrus whispered reverently. Source of our covenant, heart of wolf power. Diana approached the pool slowly, drawn by some instinct beyond conscious thought. The liquid within, neither water nor quite solid, pulsed with a rhythm that matched her heartbeat, responding to her presence just as the garden pool had, but with far greater intensity. What is it? She asked, mesmerized by the swirling patterns. Liquid moonlight, Reaver answered, coming to stand beside her, captured and preserved by the first alpha when the original pact was sealed. It responds to royal blood, recognizes you as its rightful guardian. The warriors arranged themselves in a circle around the pool, with Diana at its center. Reaver stood directly across from her, his silver eyes reflecting the pool's luminescence. Remove the moon fang, he instructed. Place it in the pool. Diana's hand went protectively to the bone pendant at her throat. Is that safe? You said it maintains the barriers keeping Eclipse imprisoned. The pool will amplify its power, not diminish it, Cyrus explained. For this ritual to succeed, the Moonfang must connect directly with the source of the covenant. With hesitant fingers, Diana unclasped the necklace, feeling strangely vulnerable without its familiar weight against her skin. She knelt at the pool's edge and carefully lowered the pendant into the glowing liquid. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The pool's illumination intensified tenfold, brilliant light shooting upward in a column that reached toward the distant ceiling. The Moonfang floated at its center, rotating slowly, the ancient symbols carved into its surface glowing with inner fire. Now you, Reaver directed, step into the pool. Diana hesitated, eyeing the strange liquid dubiously. Will it harm me? It will transform you, Reaver answered honestly. Pain and power often walk hand in hand, Diana Winters. This is the moment of choice. Step forward into your heritage or walk away. No one here will think less of you if you choose the latter. But they both knew retreat was not a true option. Not with Eclipse's cult preparing their ritual, not with the fate of the 7 territories hanging in the balance. Diana removed her boots and outer garments, leaving only a simple shift. The stone felt cool beneath her bare feet as she approached the pool's edge. Taking a deep breath, she stepped into the glowing liquid. Sensation overwhelmed her immediately. Not pain, not yet, but an intensity that bordered on unbearable. The liquid moonlight swirled around her calves, warm and somehow alive, responding to her presence with eager recognition. Continue, Reaver urged. To the center, to the Moonfang. Diana waded deeper, the strange liquid rising to her knees, then her thighs. Each step sent ripples of energy coursing through her body, awakening nerves she hadn't known existed, stirring something primal and ancient in her blood. When she reached the center, the Moonfang rose from the pool's surface, hovering before her at eye level. Without conscious thought, Diana reached for it, her fingers closing around the ancient bone. Power exploded through her system. Pure, undiluted lunar energy coursed through her veins, seeking the sealed wolf within, battering against the constraints that had imprisoned it for so long. This was pain beyond description. Every cell in her body screaming as the seal fought to maintain itself against the onslaught. Diana cried out, nearly collapsing as the agony threatened to overwhelm her. Through tear-blurred eyes, she saw Reaver and the others step into the pool, forming a tight circle around her. Their voices rose in an ancient chant, words in a language she didn't recognize, but somehow understood. A plea to the moon, to the original covenant, to acknowledge its daughter and free her from unnatural bonds. The pain crescendoed, becoming so intense that Diana could no longer distinguish individual sensations. Her consciousness began to fragment, darkness encroaching at the edges of her vision. Then she felt it. Reaver's presence in her mind, a steadying force amid the chaos. Through some mechanism of the ritual, he had established a mental link, bearing part of her pain, lending her his strength. One by one, the others joined, creating a web of support around her consciousness. Alaric's unyielding determination, Cyrus's ancient wisdom, the steady courage of the royal guards. Their combined will focused on a single purpose, breaking the curse that bound Diana's true nature. Within her mind, Diana found herself standing before the lattice of magical constraints that sealed her wolf. No longer a passive observer, she now actively attacked the barriers, drawing on the combined strength flowing through the pack bonds, channeling the moon pool's energy into each strike. The seal fractured, cracks spreading like lightning across its surface. The wolf beyond pushed from the other side, silver eyes gleaming with anticipation, with hunger for freedom long denied. With one final surge of effort, Diana struck at the center of the seal. The barrier shattered like glass, dissolving into motes of light that scattered and faded. Her wolf leaped forward, no longer separate but merging with Diana's consciousness, two halves of a whole reuniting after a lifetime of artificial division. Transformations swept through her physical body. Bones shifted, muscles reorganized, senses sharpened beyond human comprehension. Diana fell forward into the pool, her human form giving way to something both ancient and new. A massive silver wolf, larger than any Omega had right to be, royal blood evident in every powerful line of her body. The pack members drew back, giving her space as she found her balance on four legs, shaking moonlight from her silver fur. Diana's consciousness adjusted to the new perspective, the wolf's senses flooding her mind with information. Scents, sounds, energies invisible to human perception. She could smell the individual signatures of each pack member, could hear their heartbeats accelerating with awe and trepidation. Most significantly, she could sense the moon pool's true nature, not merely liquid moonlight, but a living connection to the celestial powers that had blessed wolfkind a millennium ago. Diana turned in a circle, examining her transformed body with wonder. Her fur shimmered with an inner light, catching and reflecting the pool's radiance. Power coursed through her limbs, raw and heady after a lifetime of constraint. Her gaze found Reaver, who had shifted to his own wolf form, a massive black wolf with silver eyes and a regal bearing that made even Alaric's impressive gray wolf form seem ordinary by comparison. Communication flowed between them without words, wolf to wolf, alpha to something new. Not Omega, not any longer. The royal blood had awakened fully, placing Diana outside traditional pack hierarchies. The realization almost made her miss the secondary awareness dawning at the edges of her consciousness, a connection not just to the pack surrounding her, but to the land itself. Through the moon pool, through her unleashed blood, Diana could sense the 7 territories spreading out from Moonhold in all directions, could feel the subtle energies that maintained the barriers between worlds, the weakening points where Eclipse's influence seeped through like poison. And she could sense something else. A presence, distant but approaching, ancient and malevolent, pushing against the thinning barriers with growing strength as the eclipse drew nearer. Eclipse herself, preparing for her return. Diana growled, the sound rumbling from deep in her chest. The enemy who had cursed her bloodline, who had separated Luna from her mate, who now threatened everything Diana had come to value. She would face this enemy with her power fully awakened, her heritage embraced. With a thought, Diana shifted back to human form, the transformation smoother than she could have imagined possible. The Moonfang manifested around her throat once more, its power integrated with her own in ways she was only beginning to understand. "It worked," she said, her voice stronger and more resonant than before. "The seal is broken." Reaver shifted back as well, regarding her with an expression that mingled satisfaction with something deeper, more complex. "Not just broken. You've achieved full integration, human and wolf in perfect balance. Even Luna needed years to master such control." Diana felt the truth of his words. The wolf remained present in her consciousness, no longer a separate entity struggling for freedom, but an integral part of herself, lending its strength, its instincts, its ancient knowledge to her human mind. "I can sense eclipse," she told them, her expression grave. "Through the moon pool, through the territorial bonds. She gathers her power beyond the barriers, waiting for the eclipse to create her window of return." Alaric, who had shifted back to human form along with the others, exchanged concerned glances with Reaver. "We suspected as much, but confirmation is troubling." "Can you sense where the barriers are weakest?" Reaver asked Diana. She closed her eyes, focusing on the strange new awareness. "The Blackstone altar, as you predicted, the site of their original confrontation serves as a natural focal point, but there are other locations, lesser breaches, where Eclipse's influence seeps through." "Her cultists," Cyrus surmised. "Each ritual site they've established creates another potential entry point." Reaver nodded grimly. "Which means our original plan requires modification. We cannot focus solely on the Blackstone altar. We must address these secondary breaches as well." "How?" Diana asked. "We've prepared for a single strike force. We don't have enough trusted warriors to divide our efforts." "We do if we employ your newly awakened powers," Reaver answered, studying her with calculating eyes. "The royal bloodline carries abilities beyond mere transformation. Luna could extend her will across great distances, could empower others to act as her agents. If you've inherited even a fraction of that capability, you want me to try to duplicate abilities I didn't know existed until 30 seconds ago?" Diana asked incredulously. "I want you to access the ancestral memories now fully available to your awakened wolf," Reaver corrected. "The knowledge is there within you. Luna's blood remembers what Luna knew." Diana wasn't entirely convinced, but she closed her eyes again, turning her attention inward. The wolf aspect of her consciousness responded eagerly, drawing her deeper into the reservoir of inherited memory. Images, sensations, and knowledge unfolded within her mind. Generations of royal wolves, their experiences preserved in blood and bone, passed down to their descendants. Diana sifted through the flood of information, seeking specific memories of Luna, of her powers, of how she had extended her will beyond her physical form. "I see it," she whispered, eyes still closed. Luna could create extensions of herself, silver shadows that carried her consciousness, her power, to distant locations. "Moonrace," Cyrus applied the term. "Projections of royal will given semi-physical form through lunar energy. Luna was particularly skilled in their creation and control." Diana opened her eyes, newfound knowledge settling into place alongside her own experiences. "I can try. The blood remembers, as you said, but I'll need time to practice to master the technique." 7 days remain before the eclipse," Reaver reminded her. "Make the most of them." The next week passed in a blur of intense training. Diana's newly awakened powers manifested in ways that surprised even Reaver. Her control over transformation became fluid, instantaneous. Her physical strength and speed exceeded that of born alphas. Most significantly, she quickly mastered the creation of moonwraiths, silver projections of her consciousness that could travel independently across the 7 territories, observing, influencing, even engaging in limited physical interaction with the world. Through these ethereal extensions, Diana monitored Eclipse's cult activities, identifying 13 secondary ritual sites beyond the main gathering at Blackstone Altar. Each location had been carefully chosen to align with ley lines, natural channels of Earth energy that, when properly manipulated, could weaken the barriers between worlds. They're creating a network, she explained to Reaver and the others during a strategy session 3 days before the eclipse. The secondary sites form a pattern around the Blackstone altar. When the eclipse reaches totality, they'll channel energy along these ley lines, creating a focal point of immense power. Enough power to break the barriers completely? Alaric asked, studying the map where Diana had marked each location. Enough to create a temporary breach, Diana confirmed. A window through which Eclipse could return physically to our world. Then we must disrupt the network, Reaver decided. Neutralize the secondary sites before focusing our main force on the Blackstone altar itself. The plan took shape quickly. Diana would create 13 moonwraiths, each empowered to disrupt a specific ritual site. Meanwhile, Reaver would lead a small strike force, Alaric, Cyrus, Diana herself, and 3 trusted warriors, directly to Blackstone altar to confront the cult's main gathering. Timing would be critical. The secondary sites needed to be neutralized simultaneously, preventing the cultists from adapting their ritual to compensate for individual failures. The main strike would follow immediately, capitalizing on the confusion and loss of power. 2 days before the eclipse, as they finalized preparations, Diana sought out Reaver in Luna's garden. She found him seated beside the reflecting pool, his expression distant, lost in memories or strategies. "May I join you?" she asked, pausing at the garden's entrance. He nodded, shifting slightly to make room on the stone bench. Diana sat beside him, close enough to sense the heat of his body, but maintaining a respectful distance. For several minutes they sat in companionable silence, watching the pool's surface ripple with patterns triggered by their royal blood. "I never thanked you," Diana said finally, "for finding me, for bringing me to Moonhold, for helping me break the seal and discover who I truly am." Reaver's silver eyes remained fixed on the pool. "You've more than repaid any debt through your commitment to stopping Eclipse. The 7 territories owe you a debt of gratitude, not the reverse." "Still," Diana persisted, "my life would have ended in that snow circle if you hadn't arrived when you did. Instead, I've found—" She hesitated, searching for the right words. "Purpose, belonging, things I never expected to experience." Reaver turned to her then, his expression softening almost imperceptibly. "And I found hope after 2 centuries of searching. Perhaps the debt flows both ways." The moment stretched between them, charged with unspoken emotions. Diana was acutely aware of how much had changed between them since their first meeting. Fear and suspicion giving way to respect, then trust, then something deeper that neither had acknowledged directly. "If we succeed," she began carefully, "if we stop Eclipse and secure the barriers, what happens afterward?" "The 7 territories will need time to heal," Reaver answered. "Eclipse's influence has corrupted more than just the cult members. It's seeped into our governance, our traditions, our very way of life." "And my role in that healing?" Diana pressed. Reaver studied her for a long moment before responding. "That will be your choice to make, Diana Winters. You have proven yourself worthy of your bloodline. Whatever path you choose, whether to remain at Moonhold or forge your own way elsewhere, I will support that decision." The careful neutrality of his tone told Diana more than his words. For all his control, Reaver Blackthorn had developed feelings for her that extended beyond strategic alliance or even friendship. Feelings complicated by her possible relation to Luna, by the weight of history and prophecy. Feelings Diana increasingly reciprocated, though she had barely allowed herself to acknowledge them amid the crisis they faced. "And if I chose to stay?" she asked softly. Something flickered in Reaver's silver eyes, hope, perhaps, quickly masked by caution. "Moonhold would welcome Luna's blood returning to its halls. The 7 territories would benefit from your guidance as they recover from Eclipse's shadow." "That's not what I asked," Diana said, finding courage she hadn't known she possessed. "If I chose to stay, what would it mean for us, for this connection that's grown between us?" Reaver went still, tension evident in the set of his shoulders. For a moment, Diana feared she had overstepped, had imagined significance in interactions that meant something entirely different to him. "Luna was my moon-bonded mate," he said finally, his voice low. "For centuries, she was my heart, my purpose. When she vanished, something vital within me died. I never expected to feel anything approaching that connection again. He turned to Diana fully, allowing her to see past his carefully maintained barriers to the vulnerability beneath. Yet these past weeks, watching you grow into your power, witnessing your courage and determination, something has awakened that I thought forever lost. Diana's breath caught at the raw honesty in his voice, in his expression. And that frightens you. It terrifies me, Reaver admitted, not because the feeling itself is unwelcome, but because we face an enemy who has already taken everything I valued once before. The thought of finding something precious only to lose it again. We might die facing eclipse, Diana acknowledged bluntly. Either or both of us. That's the reality we face. But should that possibility prevent us from acknowledging what exists between us now? Reaver's hand moved to cover hers where it rested on the bench between them. The contact sent warmth cascading through Diana's body, her awakened wolf responding to his touch with eager recognition. After the eclipse, he said, his voice firming with decision, if we survive, if we succeed, we will have this conversation to end, with the luxury of time and safety that we cannot afford now. Diana nodded, accepting the wisdom in his caution while treasuring the acknowledgement of possibilities. After the eclipse, then, they sat together a while longer, hands joined, watching the patterns form and dissolve in the reflecting pool. No further words were necessary. The understanding between them had been established, a promise of future conversations once the immediate threat had passed, if they survived. The day before the eclipse dawned clear and cold. The mountains surrounding Moonhold etched sharply against a cloudless sky. Diana stood on the ramparts watching the sunrise, aware that the next sunset would bring the celestial event that might determine the fate of the 7 territories. Her preparations were complete. The moon wraiths had been created, 13 silver shadows currently dormant, but ready to activate at her command. Each contained a portion of her consciousness, a fragment of her will, empowered to disrupt the specific ritual site to which it had been assigned. The strike team was prepared as well, weapons blessed with lunar energy, protective amulets crafted by Cyrus, detailed maps and strategies reviewed until every member could recite their role from memory. All that remained was the waiting, the tension of anticipation that stretched nerves to breaking point. Diana sensed Alaric's approach before she heard his footsteps on the stone stairway. The general joined her at the rampart, his weathered face betraying none of the concern she knew he must feel. "The king requests your presence in the war room," he informed her. "Final preparations for tomorrow's operation." Diana nodded, taking one last look at the mountains before following Alaric down the winding staircase. As they walked, she noticed a subtle change in the general's demeanor, a new respect in his posture, a deference that went beyond mere politeness. "You've accepted me," she observed. "You no longer see me as an interloper or a potential threat." Alaric's mouth twitched in what might have been a suppressed smile. "I've served Reaver Blackthorn for 2 centuries, Lady Diana. I've seen pretenders come and go, each claiming some connection to the throne, to Luna's legacy. None have proven worthy of the blood they claim to carry." He glanced at her, a rare warmth in his green eyes. "You, however, have demonstrated not only the power of royal blood, but the character to wield it responsibly. That earns my respect, regardless of lineage." Coming from the taciturn general, this was high praise indeed. Diana inclined her head in acknowledgement, strangely moved by his approval. The war room bustled with activity when they arrived. Maps covered every surface, marked with the latest intelligence on cult movements. Weapons and supplies had been laid out in neat rows, ready for distribution. Reaver stood at the center of it all, issuing final instructions to the 3 warriors who would accompany them to Blackstone Altar. He looked up as Diana and Alaric entered, silver eyes briefly meeting hers before returning to the task at hand. The moment of connection, brief as it was, sent warmth through Diana's core. "The cultists have begun gathering at the secondary sites," Reaver informed them, gesturing to the map. "By our estimates, over 300 followers will participate in tomorrow's ritual, with at least 50 at the Blackstone altar itself." Diana frowned. "More than we anticipated. Can 5 wolves, even with my moon wraiths, overcome such numbers?" "We don't need to defeat them all," Reaver reminded her. "Only disrupt the ritual at its critical moment. The eclipse reaches totality at midnight precisely. That's when the barriers will be most vulnerable, when Eclipse will attempt to force her way through. Cyrus joined them, carrying an ancient scroll that he unrolled carefully on the table. I've translated the counter ritual. It will require precise timing and the full power of the Moonfang, channeled through Diana's awakened blood. The elderly advisor turned to Diana with solemn eyes. You must be at the center of the altar stone when the eclipse reaches totality. The Moonfang must touch the black crystal that forms the ritual focus. Your blood, willingly given, must seal the breach as it forms. My blood? Diana repeated, a chill running down her spine. Cyrus nodded gravely. Royal blood freely offered is the key component, the same power that Luna used to create the original banishment. Diana absorbed this information, understanding the implications. This was not merely a battle to prevent Eclipse's return. It was potentially a sacrifice, just as Luna's had been. Will it require, she hesitated, then forced herself to ask directly, will it require my life as it apparently required Luna's? The room fell silent, all eyes turning to Cyrus. The old advisor's face reflected centuries of wisdom and sorrow. I cannot say with certainty, he admitted. The texts are unclear. Luna's sacrifice was absolute. She poured her entire being into the spell that created the barriers. But she acted alone with no preparation, in the midst of battle. He gestured to the gathered wolves. You have advantages she did not. A prepared ritual, supporting pack energy, your fully awakened powers. These may allow you to complete the seal without the ultimate sacrifice. Or they may not, Dinah finished for him. Reaver's voice cut through the tension. If there is any indication that the ritual requires your life, Diana, you will withdraw immediately. We will find another way. His tone brooked no argument, but Diana met his gaze steadily. If the choice is between my life and Eclipse's return, between my sacrifice and the destruction of the 7 territories, there is no choice at all. Reaver's expression hardened. We are not sacrificing anyone. That is final. He turned back to the maps, effectively ending the discussion. Now let's review the approach routes one more time. The planning session continued for hours, each detail examined, each contingency considered. By evening, there was nothing left to prepare, nothing left to discuss. The mission would proceed at dawn, allowing the strike team to reach Blackstone Altar well before the cultists completed their preparations for the midnight ritual. As the others dispersed to rest before the morning departure, Reaver held Diana back with a light touch on her arm. When they were alone in the war room, he spoke quietly but with intensity. I meant what I said. Your life is not a price I am willing to pay, regardless of the alternative. Diana studied him, seeing past the king to the man beneath, the man who had lost everything once before and could not bear to face such loss again. Some decisions are not yours to make, Reaver, she said gently. Just as Luna chose her path 2 centuries ago, I must be free to choose mine if the moment comes. Luna's choice left wounds that have never healed, he countered, rare emotion breaking through his control. The 7 territories have suffered for her absence. I have suffered. Diana stepped closer, close enough to feel the heat radiating from his body. And yet, would you undo her choice if you could? Knowing it would mean Eclipse's victory, the destruction of everything you've built? The conflict in his silver eyes told her everything. Reaver Blackthorn, for all his power and authority, remained haunted by the impossible choice Luna had made, a choice he understood but had never fully accepted. Promise me one thing, he said finally. Promise that sacrifice will be the last resort, not the first. That you will fight to live, to return. Diana raised her hand to his face, a gesture of intimacy she would never have dared weeks ago. I promise to fight with everything I have, to use every advantage, every resource, every moment of training you have given me. Beyond that, we face our fate together, Reaver finished, capturing her hand in his, as Luna and I should have done centuries ago. The admission hung between them, his greatest regret, finally voiced after 200 years. He had not been with Luna at the final confrontation, had not stood beside his mate as she made her ultimate sacrifice. That absence had haunted him across the centuries. Tomorrow will be different, Diana assured him. Whatever comes, we face it together. As she spoke the words, she felt their truth settle into her bones, into her awakened blood. Whatever happened at Blackstone Altar, victory or defeat, survival or sacrifice, they would meet it united, a strength Luna had been denied. In that unity lay their greatest hope, their greatest power, and perhaps their redemption.